And then remember to send it to your friends, because I want to get rich real quick too. Yes. So, yeah, send it to Audrey, because then we can get in and Mike too. We can all become rich and then we can stop working. That's right. Sure.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Sorry, we're already at 11:02, so we are going to call to order the March 19th Special City Council Strategic Planning Workshop. As the council will recall, Jeff is a local strategic planning consultant of Morrison & Company. He was selected to facilitate this process today, aimed at achieving improved alignment of organizational priorities, enhanced collaboration, and defining a strategic direction to the City of Chico. For this process, Jeff met with each council member, the department heads, to lay the foundation for today's public session. Following the completion of this process, Jeff will also create a comprehensive strategic planning document, which will be available to both internal and external stakeholders. Speaker card announcement. Anyone wishing to address the council on this strategic planning priorities, please complete the speaker card, which can be found at the back of the room, and turn it into the city clerk. Speakers will be called in the order the cards are received. Since this is a special council meeting, the council is prohibited by law from considering any other business at this meeting. Following the opening comments, our consultant, the citizens, will be addressed and asked us to address the council on this strategy workshop. So with that, Ms. Presson, can you call roll for us?
Councilmember Goldstein.
Present.
Councilmember Hawley.
Here.
Councilmember O'Brien.
Here.
Councilmember Van Overbeck. Here. Councilmember Winslow.
Here.
Vice Mayor Bennett.
Here.
And Mayor Reynolds.
Here. All right, and with that, I will turn it over to Jeff, our strategic planning consultant.
Perfect. Can everybody hear me okay? Am I on? I think I'm on. So I'll make sure not to do this. There we go. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and public, thanks for being here as well. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. Anytime I have a chance to lead a strategic planning process, it's a lot of fun for me. So this is especially fun, and I would argue important, because this is the place that I was born and raised and have a special place in my heart. For Chico, I have 4 young kids, so I have an opportunity to raise them in this place, and so I'm grateful to be engaged in this process. I want to just really quickly, before we kind of jump in, say some thank yous. Thank you to all the council members for your willingness to engage in a one-on-one meeting with me. It was probably last month that we did that, maybe early this month. Your contributions, the comments made, were very helpful in helping me understand more about process, but also how do we design a workshop that's actually going to be beneficial for us today. For the city staff, department heads, thanks for the opportunity to be with you in your meeting a couple weeks ago, to hear from you. And then I want to give a special thanks to Debbie and Angie, who have just been wonderful to work with over the past, I don't know, it's been a very quick turnaround time, maybe a month or so. So I always like to start by saying thank you, and Angie by saying thank you, because I don't take what we get to do for granted. I know that Mayor Reynolds, you said we're already 2 minutes behind. I will get those minutes back. Okay, so the plan today is, and she's already gone over this. I already talked a little about kind of where I'm from, what Chico State. I also teach at Duke College and have been teaching for a number of years, which will probably become somewhat obvious throughout our process today. Here's our timeline for today's exercise or this workshop. We'll do some introductions, which we've already done some of, some expectations. We'll spend about the next 90 minutes with me doing some of that, and then we're going to open up for our time for public comments to be made. When that is done, we'll come back together, and I'm going to walk us through a very brief exercise on why, so the importance of the why of what we're doing, and then talk about what is strategy. And you'll notice that as I do this work, I'm trying to do a little bit of instruction so that we're all kind of on the same page and have the same understanding of where we're coming from, where we're going. I think that helps to, I think it leads to some better outcomes. And then we're going to break at noon for lunch. And as I said earlier, even if I am mid-sentence, we're still going to end at noon for lunch. And we'll take a 30-minute break for that, and we'll come back and we'll finish out our time. We'll do a visioning exercise. We'll walk through something.
We're working on your audio. It's really,
I think
I'm just,
back from the microphone and the
Is this one here? I can turn this off. Yeah. I don't think that's on.
Testing, not on.
Okay. No. In the afternoon, we'll come back. We'll do a visioning exercise, walk through the strategic choice framework, and that's really where the work starts to take place of what are we going to focus on? What are our big initiatives and our focused strategic goals that we'll walk through, and then we'll do a goal-setting exercise, and we'll adjourn promptly at 3 p.m., okay? So here's some ground rules. I always like to kind of make sure that we all have a firm understanding of where we're headed. So everyone participates. Everyone's voice matters. I like to say leave some preconceived notions and assumptions by the wayside. I think some of us walk into an exercise like this, especially if you have past experience with a strategic plan, you think it's going to go a certain way. And I always find if I can lay those by the side, sometimes it leads to some surprising outcomes, and I hope that's the case today. My thought is that how we approach the work today may be a little bit different from what you've previously experienced, and in fact, I hope that's the case. Some of the language and the verbiage that we'll use, you may not at first glance think necessarily applies to this discussion, but I'll try and make a connection to how and why it does. And so I think if we can kind of just say, let's have an open mind in this discussion, I think our outcomes will be even better. There will be some items that we'll probably need to place in what we'll call the parking lot. We'll address them, but it might not be appropriate at the time that they come up for us to do so, so we'll have to make a note of that. And then what's really important, I like to right-size expectations. I have a personal motto in my life to set my expectations low, and I'm sure to supersede them. So if I said we're going to accomplish 17 things today and we do 4, then it's been a massive failure. But if I say we're going to accomplish 3 and we accomplish 5, then it's been a success. And so it's okay for us to not accomplish everything today. One of the things that I told all the council members, the city staff, city clerk, deputy director, in our conversations is I am not done with this process until I am told that I am done. So we will continue to work together to accomplish what needs to take place in this strategic plan. This is your workshop, and because of that, collaboration and cooperation are key. So Mayor Reynolds, you've already described kind of the process and the meetings that took place, so I appreciate you. There's your 2 minutes back. If you've already explained all those things, I don't have to do that, so I appreciate that. Expectations. You have, and I think all of you in the audience have as well, a worksheet that I've typed up, and Angie and I frantically got printed out this morning to make sure that it was readable. We are not going to come up with 7 to 10, 15 strategic goals and objectives today. That can't be the goal. We have a very limited amount of time to work together. So what I would say is our success looks like somewhere between 3 and 5 strategic goals going forward. And the time frame we're going to look at them, and this will make more sense, we'll do an exercise after lunch. We're looking at the immediate need, we're looking at the short term, so a 2-year time frame, and the long term, which really isn't that long, but the 4-year term. The thing that's important as we walk through those kind of steps to get to the immediate, the 2 and the 4, we don't get to the 4 unless we get to the 2. We don't get to the 2 unless we get to the immediate. And what we're doing here, and what I appreciate about how this is structured, is that we are having a discussion that ties directly to budget. That's really key in this process. And so often, I will work on projects like this, and it might be an afterthought that budget comes up, but it's not the leading force to the discussion. And so I think that's a really key component, and I appreciate that's how it's been designed today, so we can actually tie our goals to budget as we go through that process to then put before for this upcoming fiscal year. The last thing I'd say, it was on the internet, so I can't tell you exactly who said it, though some would say that Abraham Lincoln is responsible for this quote. It says, you can please some of the people all the time, all the people some of the time, but you can never please all the people all the time. And so that's the beauty of a conversation like this, is we get to collaborate and we get to compromise and cooperate. The founder of my company, Brent Morrison, likes to say in follow-up to this comment, he says, however, you can make all the people mad all the time. And I hope that that's not the case today. So with those introductory comments, we'd like to now open it up for public comment, and I think we'll have some direction there, and we'll come back together, and we'll finish out before we go to lunch. So, thanks again for having me.
All right, so this is time for public comment. Be sure to send in your speaker card since we're doing this in the beginning. Just want to give everybody an extra second. If you want to get a speaker card in, go ahead and do that now, and then I will turn it over to Ms. Presson do we have any speakers?
We do. We have 3 so far, and then if anyone else wants to address, obviously they can get it in.
We'll bend our rules just a hair today.
Okay, and I'll go ahead and call the first 2 speakers, Bob Mulholland, followed by Charles Withhoon.
Bob Mulholland here, just here to comment about the budget. I would make tree burning a top budget item. Under this Republican-controlled council over the last week, our sales tax has gone up 12%, sewer fees have been doubled, and last summer, I guess the city manager decided to argue for a pay package increase to match the governor's or better than the governor's, and then cut the budget, I think about $10,000 for a pre-burn because Butte County never has any fires. And then we got the Park Fire, which destroyed Cohasset. So I would urge a 5-year freeze on the top management salaries and pay packages, as well as at Los Angeles City Attorney's Office. If we don't have money to cut a few weeks, there's a problem here at City Hall.
Thank you. Charles Withhoon.
Thank you. North State Shelter Team managed campground proposal accommodates 12 unsheltered locals. It is drawn from successful programs to address our shelter crisis one step at a time. According to the data, typically, crime goes down or is unaffected by similar programs. I would say safety is one of our #1 goals. You want a safer Chico? Have a safe place for more people to be at night, and you will have safer streets. The managed campground is for unsheltered local people who pass a case manager's interview process, a background check, and sign a participants agreement. They are participants in a program without residential rights, and so eviction can be a quick process. After 4 years of meeting with unsheltered Chicoans, we are aware of many unsheltered people, many of them elderly women, who have an income, just not enough to rent a room. Participants would pay a monthly fee to have a safe and secure place to sleep at night that would be a stepping stone to getting their lives back together, to get back into with their families or back into subsidized housing or some other chat program. It's too shocking to expect people who've been out on the street to go right into one of the big shelters that we have now. Over 100 people each. It's intimidating. Just doesn't work. Underreported story number 21 for Project Censored. Nearly half of unhoused people are employed. Leaving someone on the street, according to a university survey, costs us about $14,000 a year that we taxpayers pay. The cost at Opportunity Village per person is about $2,000 a year that the participant pays. I would say, after safety, wise use of taxpayer money is a valuable goal. And right now, we can use some work in that regard, I suggest. North State Shelter Team has studied managed campground proposals in San Diego, Portland, Denver, Santa Fe, Culver City, and Seattle. And we have letters of support from 8 other local nonprofit organizations. We can have safer streets with less despair and save money doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Ken Smith, followed by Patrizia.
Good morning, Ken Smith, here representing Chico Firefighters Local 2734 as the president for the last 10 years. Been working really hard to emphasize exactly what our consultant opened up with about this being a very specific strategic planning process towards the budget. And we just want to make sure that we're here available to you to express how much of an immediate need Engine 1 downtown is. We don't have a pumper downtown. We've had many conversations over and over and over about staffing and models and this and that. Chief Standridge does his best to bring into the public eye the need for staffing, need for Station 6. But there's an old saying, if you fight the fire you have now. And coming into this next budget session, we just implore you to look at all ideas, look at all revenue sources to try to come up with a plan to implement Engine 1 as a pumping engine at your downtown fire station. It's an absolute void that is it's monumental. We have such a high-risk profile down here with the college and the old Vics and the downtown, unprotected downtown structures. We run simply just the ladder truck, right? We've all had conversations about its job tasks and its capabilities. Bottom line is we don't have a water pumping fire engine at Station 1. Let's keep it that simple. We put 3 bodies on there and we're running Engine 1, Truck 1, we're ready to fight. It's bottom line. So I'm really excited about this whole strategic planning process. Been part of a bunch of them. Sometimes it's hard to break down those biases before you start really thinking outside and listening to other ideas. But by the end of the day, with any strategic planning process I've been in, it's always been successful at the end when we all work together and move forward. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Patrizia is our last speaker.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Patrizia Hieronymus, Executive Director of Butte Environmental Council. Hi, Bryce. There, that's better. I think I can see everyone. I'm coming to you today as a constituent who was raised in Oroville, California, here in Butte County. I moved around a lot to try to find some relief from the drought that I grew up in and ended up in the Pacific Northwest. Now I'm back, and I get to lead an organization that's a nonprofit. And as you may or may not know, funding is dire right now in our current circumstances. And I implore you to look at this budget responsibly and invest in Butte County. And I mean that in the simplest of terms, in our urban canopy, in our waters, our air, our soils. We got to go on a tour of groundwater-dependent ecosystems yesterday with Audubon, California, and the Nature Conservancy, and we're looking at interbasin modeling and streams and rivers, and this is what we have to protect here in Chico. Our tributaries are legendary. We have one of the last spring-run Chinook salmon runs here at Butte Creek, and I just implore you to spend as much as you can investing in what makes Chico special in Butte County, and that's our water. And just take a loving embrace of everything that we have and pour everything that you have into it. That's my one just constituent request, because we know how vital it is, and we have seen what's happened when we drop that water table down, and we don't want that to happen here. And that's why I'm here today, is just to come and ask you to just remember the land, air, and water and invest, please. Thank you.
Thank you. She's our final speaker.
All right, with that, I will turn it back over to Jeff, and we'll get a little bit of work done before we head into lunch.
Well, thank you for all the comments. I appreciate the opportunity that we have to speak, to be vocal, to share concerns and ideas. I appreciate the opportunity that's provided for our folks from the City of Chico to do that today. This is a little bit smaller print here, but I'd like to start a process with this Dilbert cartoon. You'll notice that while this is very serious work that we're doing, at the same time, I try to bring some humor because I think that helps to just make things more enjoyable. And you can see this says, make a report consistent with our strategic plan. It's told, what's our strategic plan? In response, it's a secret. Are you saying you don't trust me? I don't think it's a coincidence that most employee sabotage is done by employees. How can I do my report if I don't know the strategy? Okay, I'll let you glance at it. Time's up, that's not enough. That's the warranty for your chair. Really? I've been managing to this for years. And so there's a couple chuckles that come with that. Why do I do this? Because I think so often, if we're honest about it, this is how, maybe not this extreme, but folks do manage to a strategic plan that's akin to the warranty for a chair. Right? We have these ideas. You probably heard it said that hope is not a strategy. We hope that things will become better. We hope that we'll see improvement. We hope that these things will be accomplished. But if we're not planning strategically, then it's nothing more than just hope. And we want hope. We need hope. Hope is essential, but I would argue it's not an either or, it's a both and, right? Let's hope and let's plan. I did a strategic plan earlier with another governmental organization earlier this year, and some of the constituents that we spoke with had some really great comments, and I want to share this one with us as we launch into where we're headed the rest of our time. And you can see this on the screens, it's in the handouts that you have, and I'll read this for you. It says, having a strategic plan is a great way to check priorities and progress. Remember to always plan the work and work the plan. Everything cannot be a high priority and an immediate need. Having goals is always a great thing to strive for, but taking into account the resources and funding available make priorities real and attainable. At the end of our time, we're going to flip the header of this slide. We're planning the work, and as we leave, we're going out to work the plan. It has to be both. And so I wish I could say that I was responsible for this quote. I'm not. Someone else who's very invested in their government agency had these very wise words to share, and I think it's helpful for us to think about. As I mentioned, I teach at Butte College, and as someone who spent the last 20 plus years in the academy, I can't help but do some teaching when it comes to a process and a project like this. In fact, I had a strategic plan that I conducted last year, and the board chair told the president, we liked the results, but we didn't like the consultant. And I was waiting for the why. Okay, so why is that? And he said because he was far too academic. And I thought to myself, guilty as charged? If that's the worst thing I've ever been called in the day, then I think I'm okay with that. But I want to do a little bit of instruction and teaching so we all kind of are on the same page and understand what it is we're trying to accomplish today. So Porter, some years back, wrote a book on strategy, and he looks at these three different areas of what strategy, these generic strategy areas can be. We look at cost leadership, we look at differentiation, and we look at focus. And on its face, you might look at this and go, what does this have to do with us today? Right? We're a municipality, we're a city government, we're a city council. But I think these three items here have everything to do with what our goal is in the conversation today. If you take cost leadership, everything's public. And so you just heard a number of comments about budget and where funding should go. And so we think about how are we leading as a council, how are we leading as an entity, a municipality for the city of Chico, knowing that we have a responsibility and accountability to the people of Chico to use our funds wisely. So it is very much a strategy to think about how do we provide cost leadership to the community. The second piece here, differentiation, is also wildly applicable because we have to think through what is it that the city does? What is our responsibility versus the other entities involved? Obviously, we have city, we have county, we have state, we have federal, all these different modes of whether it could be financial contribution or responsibility, but what is it that differentiates the city of Chico? What specifically is it that the council has purview and oversight for, where we say, okay, how are we thinking strategically about this? And then the third area we want to look at is focus. And I think it kind of builds off of the second area of differentiation of we need to be laser focused on what's most important. You know, I know that I was reading through on the city council website, and I was away for a number of years, born and raised in Chico, but left to live in Los Angeles and in the state of Colorado for close to 20 years total. Came back 3 years ago. Since being away, I've been much more in tune with what's happening at the council level and really interested in the work that y'all are doing. And looking at the districting and realizing that while the district you were voted in and you represent the district, this conversation is looking at the focus of the entire city, the community of how we serve and we service best the city of Chico. And so while you look at these three things, and maybe they could be applied to business, absolutely, I would argue that they 100% apply to the conversation we're having today. If you take it on this next slide, you'll see that strategy is a creation of a unique and valuable position involving a different set of activities. And the conversation that we need to have today, I think that starts where we go, is figuring out what of these three categories is it that we are covering. Are we serving the few needs of many customers, or in this case, citizens? Are we serving broad needs of few customers, again, in this case, citizens? Or are we serving broad needs of many citizens in a narrow market? And as we talked about in our conversation, you'll recall, especially council members, as I asked questions, what's the one thing that's most important to you? And do you believe that something needs to be given up or sacrificed or compromised in order for you to get that one thing? Strategy requires us to make trade-offs. We have to figure out what is it that we want to do, and in return, we sometimes have to figure out what is it that we can't do or we shouldn't do. And then, of course, strategy involves creating fit amongst, in this case, the literature says companies, but in your case, the organizations, the entities, the council's activities. What we're being asked to do, does it fit within our purview? And so I want to provide just some foundational ideas of making sure that we're approaching things properly to get to our desired outcomes. Some of you may be familiar with Peter Drucker, some in the room as well. I worked at the Drucker School for a number of years down in Los Angeles. Drucker was considered by many to be kind of the grandfather or the godfather, if you will, of modern day management. Drucker was doing things beyond what other folks were doing at the time, and now graduate management schools are taking credit for what Drucker was doing 30, 40 years ago. And he asked these questions in a book, and I brought a copy of it here, called The 5 Most Important Questions You Will Ever Ask About Your Organization. And the questions are here, and I want us to be thinking through these questions. In fact, if you look at the handout that was given to you, these questions are on the final page. Because these questions are crucial to the overall conversation as we think about our strategic goals going forward. What is our mission? What is it that we are being called to do? Right? I asked each of you, why is it that you, in the first place, why did you run for city council? Why did you want to do this work? And each of you had a very unique answer, as I would imagine that you would. A number of you had a very clear impetus, like there was this one moment that said, this is why I ran, because of X. So what is the mission of the council? Right? I think we know in some ways, in fact, I'm going to show you a slide here in a little bit, that I don't know if it's necessarily specifically the mission of Chico, but certainly what's on the home page. We'll then look at who is our customer. In this case, we could look at this, who is our citizen, right? So it's the city of Chico. What is our customer value? Again, what do our citizens value? And then what are our results? What are our desired results in this whole thing? And as we're doing today, then, the question, what is our plan? So as we prepare for our break for lunch, we have 30 minutes left. I want to spend some time talking through this. And I know that this print is very small, and so I apologize if you can't see it, but I'm going to read this for you. And then I'm going to go through a couple other slides. We're going to have a brief discussion that'll lead us into our 12 o'clock lunch. Some of you may be familiar with this. Simon Sinek, he wrote a book, and he has a TED Talk. Oftentimes you can just watch the TED Talk from a lot of these folks and it saves you time from reading the book. And this, good book, but I would say just watch the TED Talk. And he talks about the why. And you can see this. He says, every organization on the planet knows what they do. These are products they sell or the services they offer. So some organizations know how they do it. These are the things that make them special or set them apart from their competition. But then he goes on and says, very few organizations know why they do what they do. Why is not about making money. That's a result. Why is a purpose, a cause, or belief? It's the very reason your organization exists. And I heard very clearly from each of you as we had those conversations that you have a why as to why you're sitting up there on the dais, why you're doing the work that you're doing. The question then we have to look at is, what's the why of the council? What's the mission of the council? Is there agreement upon that? Because I think in some ways the answer is yes. Right? We want to see Chico flourish. We want to see Chico thrive. We want to see Chico healthy. All those different things. And I can throw those ideas out, but ultimately I'm not on the council. You are. And so the discussion that we want to start with today is, what's our why? I want to give you one more thing to think through here. Simon Sinek goes on, and he gives an example of Apple. So I don't know how many of you have an Apple phone, watch, iPad, computer, I don't know, go down the list of all the things that are available. I could go down the list of the things, in fact, I did this morning, thinking through everything that I have in my house. And I am, sad to say, beholden to the almighty Apple in my family. But he goes like this, and he says, let's talk about Apple. He says, why? The purpose. This is a question that says, what is your cause? What do you believe? And Apple, the answer is, we believe in challenging the status quo and doing things differently. The how is the process. Specific actions taken to realize the why. For Apple, our products are beautifully designed and easy to use. And then what? The results. What do you do? The result of your why. Where's the proof? And in Apple, at least when he was writing the book, the answer for his why, for their why, was we make computers. But they no longer just make computers. They make phones and watches and tablets and everything else that we've talked through. But what's unique and important about Apple is their why stayed the same. Their why has been consistent throughout. So I have there in front of you, the first page, you have these three concentric circles, the why, the how, and the what. And I want us to briefly talk through what this looks like as far as what's the why of what we're doing? What's our purpose here? Maybe jot some notes down, but I'd love to hear from you so we have just out loud. So I know that you probably talk through these things, but here we are in a strategic planning session. I want us to talk about our why. What's the purpose of what we do here? And how will that then inform the conversation we have going forward as to the how and the what of what the council is to do for the city of Chico? So maybe jot some notes down. I will say that this is the first time I've done a strategic plan that's been recorded, so it's a little awkward in that there's folks potentially, in fact, my mom said, "What time is this session?" And I was like, "Oh, it's so early." But take some time and jot down some ideas. What's the why? What's the purpose of the council? I'd love for you then to share out so we can kind of have some uniform understanding of what it is that we're doing here today. And that'll inform the rest of our conversation. So take maybe 3 minutes. We won't have any background music, and then I'll call us back and we'll share out. Just take another minute or two. All right. And I apologize that those in the audience can't see what we're writing here, but I promise you we're writing things down. Okay. So, Council, what are your notes? What are your thoughts? What did you jot down? What's the why, the purpose of the City Council?
Do you want all of them or one?
Just throw them out. We're going to write them down. Because, again, what we're doing here is we're building a case as we think strategically about what goals are there. We have to tie it back and say, well, does that fit within the framework of our purpose as a council?
Okay, I'll start. I came up with like 4. I said my why is our constituents,
Okay.
our businesses, our quality of life, our future generations,
Great.
and our parks and beauty.
And if you can't read what I write, that's okay. I can't. My handwriting's so bad. When I was 7 years old, none of you care about this. I'm going to tell the story anyway. I wrote down a list of who I wanted to invite to my birthday party. And even at 7, I couldn't read my own handwriting. I couldn't remember who I wanted to come to my birthday party. So I apologize, Andy, if you were on the list of people that were supposed to be invited to the birthday party. Anyway, that's why. I couldn't read my handwriting. So I can read this now, though. So these are great. Thank you. And you said Parks and Beauty. What else?
So in a broad sense, the way I look at this. We make decisions for the betterment of our community, starting with safety.
Great.
I wrote down access to housing, safe transportation, and high quality of life, and that our city should invest in what makes it unique, sustainable, and joyful.
You said unique, sustainable, and enjoyable.
And joyful.
Joyful. Great. I love that.
Beautiful is also an alternate term.
It's alternative, but I love there's two, right? They're distinct. What's beautiful and also what's joyful, right? So I appreciate that. What else?
So I think the why needs to be simple.
Okay.
I mean, you look at apples, it's a simple sentence.
Yeah.
And my view of it is that the role of the city council is to optimize the quality of civic life,
Okay.
period. And then the rest of that stuff is the how.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Thank you. Appreciate that. What else? These are all great. And I think there's, what I love about this is so much is built in, right? So we have the conversation, we go, this, and then we have the, let's simplify, let's tear it down. But then we also want to look at where do we have common language, right? So I've heard now at least 3 times quality of life, right? So our goal in the city council is to enhance, to optimize, I love the word optimization, optimize civic quality of life, right? What a great mission to have. What else?
I put to address citizen resource gaps in transportation, service accessibility, safety, etc., because I know I can't think of it all right now. And I also put strives for unbiased opportunity for all residents to access municipal services and also be guided by the people who are closest to the roadblocks at hand.
So much there. Great. Anything else?
Filling in on like the future generations piece. I mean, we want Chico to thrive further into the future than we can imagine now. Like making decisions that impact people 100 years down the line or more.
That's great. Future generations. Say that again, to have a better life than we can imagine now.
Yeah, we want Chico to thrive, you know, have optimized civic life, those terms, further into the future than we can imagine right now.
Great.
Keep the public safe and secure.
Okay. Anything else? Did we catch it all? We tried to catch it all, right? So these are all great. And I hope you can see this. I love the comment, let's keep it simple, right? So Apple kept it simple. Let's keep it simple. And so we look at this, it just kind of off the top of my head, I'm going to go back through this, and we're going to revisit this again in the afternoon. Because this will inform the conversation. Again, what are those goals, right? So we talked 3 or 4 of you quality of life, 3 or 4 of you safety, 3 or 4 of you accessibility, right? So we want opportunities, right? Even some of the comments that were made, how did that impact the future? We want these resources to be available for future generations, right? So when you look at all of this, I hope that you hear, I hope that we hear such commonality in the discussion, right? I think so often you have this, and again, the comment I've made, let's leave kind of preconceived ideas out. We think that in politics, we have to have these divides. We have to have opposition. We have to have people that we are opposed against, rather than let's work together. And I think what we've just done in this whole case right here, it's very short, right? We took 7 minutes. But this is a great case study that says, hey, look at the things that we have in common. And how can we work together to accomplish them? Right? And maybe you have some difference as far as where we head with that, how do we do that? But if you look at simplicity, public safety, accessibility, right, quality of life, all of those things fit into it. And we want Chico, right, and I can think about this personally, as someone who's now in his mid-40s, grew up here. I had an amazing childhood growing up in the city. And I left with no kids and came back with 4 kids. Why is this process so important? Because all of what you just talked about, I want the same thing for my kids. In fact, asking to your point, I want my kids to have a better experience dying. Right? So I appreciate this. We'll come back to this. I want us to spend a couple more minutes, unless there's other comments that you want to be made. This is not just something we're going to fly over and be done with. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I think it's important to differentiate between quality of life and quality of civic life. People can interpret quality of life as I want a nice place to ride my bike. Civic life is a much broader concept, and it applies to everyone.
Wait, will you elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, so first of all, we're talking about the things that the city council can control, right? So what can we control? And this is when we get into the how, and I don't want to get, but things like, safety, infrastructure, the texture of life, so the park and the downtown, the things that make Chico special, right? And as opposed to me, quality of life is an individually focused concept. You know, quality of my life is different than what you would think of Addison, maybe. Whereas civic life implies you're thinking about it holistically for the whole community.
Yeah, you're thinking on more of a micro versus a macro level, right? So individual quality of life leads to the potential on a macro level, civic quality of life. Is that fair?
Something that makes me think of, too, that I maybe is missing from the conversation, but we agree on, is that civic life does involve the community, and so community engagement is part of this, and it's really that we're a democratic society, and while we want things to be good, we want it to be good in a way that everybody participates in it being that. And, mentioned like accessibility, but accessibility of like co-creating our future. Yeah, I think it's worth listing democracy or something on there.
And I love this idea of co-creation. I never want to do things on my own. I think we're always better together than I am by myself, right? In some parts. We're always maybe more successful. This is great. So again, I'm going to, over lunch, while you're eating, I'm going to make notes where I come back to this. Okay? This is going to inform the afternoon conversation in ways that you'll see as it rolls out. So you probably, I should say you have seen this, right? So probably, I don't know if your homepage is set in the city of Chico somewhere. And right there at the top left, we see this. It says, a safe place for your family, an ideal location for business, and a career place to live. We talked about a lot of those things already, right? Those were mentioned, right? So I want it to be safe. We want it to be a place for businesses, our constituents, a career place to live, right? Individually, but also collectively. And so as we make these decisions going forward, this is going to be the front and center of our conversation. I think how I want to proceed. I want to skip ahead to this. Because I told Dale that I was going to have this slide. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So strategic planning can be done a number of different ways. And so I appreciate the candor that was shared in these interviews that we have. And one of the things, Dale, I hope it's okay, our conversation, I told you I was not going to have a SWOT analysis of this. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. We can do that, but it's just not applicable in this conversation. Right? This is such a different, unique, much like Chico is a different, unique place. This discussion that we're having the next 3 hours now has to be different and unique because it fits within the community that you all serve. That's different and unique. When you look at a SWOT analysis, which we're not doing, don't worry. You look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, the things that are existing currently, and you plan according to that. Why are we doing this? We're doing this because this is a strength of ours. Or we're doing this because this is a weakness of ours. Or we're doing this because there's an opportunity in front of us. We're doing this because there's a threat that we're faced with. But this only tells part of the story. And that part of the story is the here and now, right? When you look at SWOT, that's the first part of, and everybody likes to come up with these acronyms and these fancy little phrases like gap analysis, right? So what's the gap analysis? It's where we are, where we want to be, how do we fill in the gap, right? So the gap analysis, to use that, is you take a SWOT, but then you apply the SOAR, the strengths, the opportunities, the aspirations, and the results. What's really important in the strategic planning process is we look at the aspirations and the results. It goes back to this question here that Drucker asked, what are our results? and what is our plan, right? We all know that there are things that we want to accomplish. I asked you those questions by the time you're done within your term, right? I think all of you know the TBD as far as what the future looks like, but we know that there's time still left in your current terms. And so what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to accomplish as a whole with this council in those time frames? Again, we look forward to an immediate 0 to 1. We have this aspiration of what success looks like. And we talked about that individually, what success looks like. Today is when we're actually then doing the plan, right? So you have these aspirations. I want this to be accomplished. What does that look like? Well, then we have to figure out how do we accomplish those realities. In the afternoon, we're going to walk through, after we do what I'm going to call a visioning exercise, and have you actually vision, kind of think through what does Chico look like 4 years from now, 2 years from now, 0 to 1 years from now. Right? I'm not saying let's create this utopia by any means, but I'm saying what are your desired outcomes? If we look out into the future and we say we've accomplished X, Y, and Z over the next, like I said, 0 to 1, 0 to 2, 0 to 4 years, is that what success looks like? So if we say our desired future is 4 years from now, we have to then work backwards in order to accomplish that. Because as much as we're setting a budget for the next next fiscal year, we know that things don't happen overnight, correct? Right? You have a plan, you say, I'd like to accomplish this. Right? I think we all could agree, we all wish that Bruce Road happened overnight, right? But it takes a while. In fact, it takes a long while so we do it right. And so we want to go through that process and think through what does that future look like and how do we work backwards. So we're going to break for lunch here. Actually, we're going to end a little bit early if that's okay. Because I think the bulk of our discussion will take place and we need more time for that after lunch. Here's what I'd like you to do. I know that you've already written this down, but on that worksheet that I gave you, if there are things that you want to hone a little bit on the why of the council, I ask you to kind of wordsmith that a little bit. But more importantly, I'll give you a preview of where we're headed. I want us to think through, and you'll notice this from the Chico State campus, today decides tomorrow. As a Chico State grad myself, 2003, alma mater, I looked at that statement and I said, I love that statement until I realized that I don't necessarily fully agree with it. And that's not a knock against the university by any means, but I think it's only partially correct. Today doesn't necessarily decide tomorrow. Today informs tomorrow. And so the decisions that are made today will have impact, they'll resonate, they'll have a ripple effect into the future. And so I'm glad, actually, that today doesn't decide tomorrow, because if I make a terrible decision today, I then have tomorrow to rectify that decision. But certainly, it is something that informs my tomorrow. It informs the future that we all envision and we want for the city of Chico, for future generations, which I think, as you said, to thrive even more so than we've ever imagined. So we'll come back, and I want you just, in your mind, be thinking through that. Again, that time frame, 4, 2, and 0 to 1 years. What does success look like? And I want us to then frame the conversation this afternoon around those 3 ideas. And what are our big, we'll call them big rocks? What are these 3 to 5 strategic goals that we'll walk away with? And if we're being especially aggressive in our conversation today, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but we will attempt to come up with those goals and the objectives. So it's one thing to come up with ideas. Like, this is great. We want to do all these different things. But then the question is how. Right? Keeping at the center why we do them, what is it we're doing, and how do we then do these things? Because here's the thing that I should have said at the beginning and I didn't. Again, I'm glad that today is inside tomorrow because I forget things sometimes. Just like right now, actually. This can't be just some ethereal, pie-in-the-sky, philosophical, theoretical conversation that ends at 3 o'clock today. This has to be a living document, a guiding principle document that says, I think even in the interview that's conducted, we're going to put it on the side of the chambers. And it's going to be the thing that we look to and say, these are our priorities going forward. It gives us a framework, kind of a lens to look through and say, does what we're attempting to do fit within those priorities right now? And if it doesn't, why is it that we're talking about it? Doesn't mean you shouldn't. When we have a conversation, we can reference back to what we said was the most important to us in the process of the project we're working on currently. I tell every client that I work with, all this is documents that sit on the shelf that we're wasting each other's time by being here. This can't be just that. It has to be something that's living, maybe not breathing, but certainly alive and directs us into the future. I think if we have that mindset going, we have a very successful conversation, and I think we'll get even a little bit closer to that desired future that our future generations will thrive more than we can ever imagine. So, it's 11:52. Why don't we break for 30 minutes?
Okay.
Let's call it 12:25, and then we'll reconvene and continue the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Future, and she can tell me why it's not going to work the way that I want it to. Or we can have those conversations and say, have you thought about it this way? And I think that's the sign of actually a really good, healthy relationship. You can have an open dialogue like that. So as we move into this afternoon session, I want us to, maybe not 5 years, but certainly think through what does the future look like? And so I asked you just to give a little bit of thought. 4 years, 2 years, and then in the immediate 0 to 1 years, especially as we set budget for this next fiscal year. I also, before I'll head there in a second, I also will say I'm used to doing a process like this, and I was talking with some folks in the audience over the lunch break, and we'll sit down at a table together, and it's a, maybe you could say a warm environment, one, the temperatures, but two, there isn't kind of the separation of desks. And so I realize that sometimes this isn't the most conducive for kind of that more, I don't know, warm conversation. So given that reality, I think we've already had a warm conversation, but just, I like to call out the awkward. Sometimes it's not as maybe user-friendly as we'd like it to be. So I hope that we can, even though it's being recorded, there's people watching, and there's folks sitting on the sides, and there's all sorts of people engaged. I just want us to, in the next 3 hours together, really engage in conversation. Kind of let our hair down a little bit if you feel comfortable in doing that. It's okay to laugh. I'll tell some jokes. They're going to be bad. They're not going to land well. I promise you that. But every now and again, maybe one will. But if we want to really accomplish things, that's, I think, the attitude and the approach we need to take. So maybe you already thought about this, but I want us to take time right now, and I want us to actually have a discussion about what Chico looks like. What's our desired future? Right? Oftentimes, if I'm doing a project like this, I would ask the question, what does success look like? And I think that's a form of a question that we could ask here. If you think about in 4 years from now, given all that we've discussed, right, all the things that we believe is our purpose as a council, what we want to accomplish for the city, the combination of what we should do and maybe the things we have to say no to, what does a desired future for you look like in 4 years? And I want you to work backwards from that. And then I want you to think, okay, so that's in 4 years. Jot that down. And then I want you to do the same exercise, but think through 2 years. And the reason I'm doing it in these kind of these increments of 2 is there's a number of you that your term ends in 2 years. A number of you, your term ends in 4 years, right? So it just kind of makes sense for it to go that process. You can write that down on the back of the handout. But then in the immediate, what's most pressing right now? So we have a budget, fiscal year starts July 1? So July 1, budget's approved, and we're talking about things that are going into that very budget, the things that were even public comment made as far as things that they're asking about and asking for. So what's the immediate that you'd say, in the next year, I hope that we can accomplish X? And then what do we need to do to work backwards from there? But I want you to have this picture of what your individual desired future is, and then I want us to come back together and talk about it. So it is 12:36. I'd like us to take 7 minutes to do that, okay? So at 12:33, I want you to share out. So think about your desired future for 4 years from now, 2 years from now, and 0 to 1 year from now, okay? And we'll have a discussion. As we all talk through these things, I'll jot them down. And basically what we're doing is we're looking at, just like we did with the why, here's what I'm hearing, here's where there's agreement, and that's where focus. Okay, so 4 years, 2 years.
So, Jeff, I have a question. Are you looking for conceptual things or more specific things like we're going to fix the potholes?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and you'll notice I'll be a little bit vague because I want you to come up with how you hear that question. So it could be conceptual and it could be specific, because what we're going to go into is likely going to be a combination of both, right? We have a conceptual, but then we have to get into the nitty gritty and figure out what's the actual technical work that needs to take place to make that happen. Okay, great question. Thanks for clarifying. So now it's 12:37, so we'll come back at 12:45. Okay, so that's 8 minutes from now. 4 years, 2 years, 0 to 1 years. they gave me a microphone, so if we need more time, I just get to decide, and we take more time. But I think we can finish up here in about another minute. Sorry. All right. Finish up your last sentence or two, and we'll come back and we'll talk through. We'll start with 4 years on the long term. And again, we're going to reference this as 4 years, 2 years, and 0 to 1 years, so long term, short term, or midterm, short term. The beauty of all of this, too, I was reminded this morning, it's recorded, so if I don't catch something, that I can go back and watch the video. If you're looking for something to do with your family or friends this Friday evening, apparently you could spend the next 4 hours watching this back again for fun over popcorn as well. So probably won't happen. But anyway, let's come back together at 12:45. Let's talk through this. And Tom, I appreciate the question for clarification. Oftentimes that question will be asked or something similar, and my response is often it depends. Really, it depends, right? So, and nobody likes that answer. But oftentimes that's the right answer, or that's the answer you give, because there's so many factors that play into it. And so it's yes and, or it's both and, or it depends, but I appreciate the clarification. So let's just vision together, 4 years from now, what do you hope to see, whether it be conceptually or technically, right, actually, here in the city of Chico? Just kind of throw out your thoughts, and we'll jot these notes down. And what we're looking for, just to, again, let the cat out of the bag, is we're looking for where do we have agreement? And so how do we get to that place? And so as we do that, when we go through, Councilmember Winslow mentioned democracy. We then have a process where we say, here's what we heard the majority of folks saying, and that really does a great job to kind of indicate where we should spend our focus in the rest of our conversation. So 4 years from now, what are your thoughts?
So the number one thing, if we go back to optimizing the quality of civic life, the number one thing that is compromising the quality of civic life is homeless people that are camped in our public spaces. And they destroy those public spaces for the use of the other citizens, the rest of the citizenry. But it's also bad for them. I mean, they die. I mean, every week we got somebody dying in a tent of a drug overdose, primarily. And so in 4 years, what I want to see is that every homeless person is either in a shelter, not a campground, in a shelter where they're on a path to improve their life. They're in treatment if they have some sort of, they have an addiction problem or mental health problem, or they're in jail if they decide that they're going to continue to disrupt civic life. That is the number one thing that needs to happen for us to get our civic life back. Can I give you a second one?
Please.
I want my 10-year-old grandkids to be able to ride their bikes in the Bidwell Park safely and not me have to worry about them. And that will only happen if we get the homeless people in shelters.
So in 4 years, they'll be 14?
Sorry?
In 4 years, they'll be 14?
Yeah, but I have a 6-year-old.
Okay, so I'm going to put grandkids. Thank you. What else?
I have a utopian vision to share. I put the city will build upon existing projects that we know work to mitigate disasters and increase our disaster resilience. I put flood risk mitigated through floodplain restoration projects like we see in Verbena Fields. That would also reduce our groundwater deficit and also expanding upon our controlled burns, which we also do.
Controlled
burns. We already have the goats reducing fuels in Lower Park, and we have fire breaks. But there are plenty of grants out there that I think California would love more cities to jump upon.
What else?
So I've got, go ahead, Bryce. I
There's
think
no
you were
order
going to
here.
go.
It might be good for other ones to like go in a line or something. I don't know.
I like
Okay.
popcorn better.
Okay, so I have a little list. People can afford to live here and pursue their passions. Downtown is thriving with local businesses. There's a lower age of first-time home buyers on average. Lower rate of pedestrian and bicyclist collisions. More students walk and bike to school. Sorry, I should read slower.
I want to get all these. So
Whoops.
Okay, so affordable housing, downtown thriving.
Lower first-time home buyer age.
Okay. I should put younger age, first time.
Perfect.
Okay.
Lower rate of pedestrian and bicycle collisions.
Okay.
Or safer streets too.
Vision zero, just be bold, you know?
Vision zero is a fine way to summarize it, but not everybody
Sorry.
knows what that is. More students walk and bike to school.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a lot of these. I don't know, you didn't limit the number.
Hey, this is your time, right? This is your
All right,
workshop,
more of our streets in the core of the city are rehabilitated or repaved. I should have written these shorter. Yeah, fix the potholes.
Okay.
The next one's Katie kind of got these. Lower risk of wildfire and flooding.
Okay.
Sustained urban forest health.
Okay.
Higher civic engagement and transparency. And I think Tom got my last one of homelessness solved. 4 years, let's go.
Okay.
All right, done.
And again,
World peace
these are big ideas, right? So when we want to start big, we want to think about what does this look like, right? So I'm going to keep. I think that there's something to be said about this. I shouldn't say think or we think. There's something to be said about this idea. We want this to be a place where future generations thrive in ways that we can't, right? More so. And I think a lot of what we're talking about gets at that. So I appreciate that. What else?
All right, so I like to identify the macro to determine the micro.
Okay.
I think that's, you need a North Star
Okay.
to determine your course. We'll talk about some of those details later, but I have safe streets, safe parks, safe neighborhoods, thriving businesses, premier education, ample housing, and recreational opportunities.
Yeah, like, it's really hard to boil things down in some ways. Yeah, I agree with all the policies, the priorities that are like identified here. You know, we talk about like controlled burns and this idea that we face a challenge of wildfire risk. In 4 years, we want to feel like we have addressed that challenge, so much so that other communities look to us for answers. We have a challenge of danger on the street, whether it's from crime or from homeless people or from car traffic. And you know, we have people getting killed on the street still. We want to look back in 4 years and say that we significantly addressed this problem, and other communities are looking to us for answers. And that's something about like policy-making approach in general, where I'm kind of thinking by July 1st, I want to think that we have an idea for how we're going to go forward to address these challenges in a substantial way. In 2 years, we're going to be fine-tuning based on our experience in the last 2 years, and in 4 years, other communities will be looking to us for the answers.
Good. Yeah, so I mean, again, you just laid out what the hope is in this exercise, right? So we want it to be built upon, but we have to start with what the 4-year North Star, kind of this big macro idea looks like, and let's build into the micros of actually how we do that. Knowing that we don't get to 4 years, like I said, without 2 years and without 1 year. And so we have to start somewhere, right? Obviously, you're already doing the work, but now we're getting it more, you know, what we're doing is we're taking a funnel in a lot of ways. My drawing is worse than my writing, so my apologies, but you get the idea. And we're throwing
That's a funnel.
things into it. This is not where we end, though, right? Where we end is down here, where we kind of squeeze things out and go, okay, here's our focus. And we're already seeing that there's lots of synergies around what's being talked about. And so the question will continue on to 4 years, but the next question is, what's different in 2 years? But I think what you just kind of got at was, we're going to fine tune it so that we can get to that 4-year time, because we have to work backwards, what we want that desired future to look like. It's good. What else?
One thing I don't know that it was like explicitly said yet, but I'm sure is on everybody's minds is like being an affordable place to live. Like
We had that earlier on.
yeah. Sometimes we talk about that in the past tense. Chico used to be affordable, or it's kind of we're losing it. And I think in 4 years it would be nice to say that that's something we just have.
Good. Appreciate that. Anything else?
I had downtown is in progress.
In 4 years?
Yes, it better be.
In progress, down.
In progress, like, we're not talking about what the streets and roads are going to look like, we're actually, whatever is envisioned for downtown, it's actually happening in 4 years, because we got to apply for grants and do all the
So what we're
public
talking
speaking.
about there, the downtown is thriving, is going to be a different
Correct.
element here, because this is the kind of the reimagination of the downtown.
Yeah, it's going to be redone because we have to do the sewer and all that. So my vision is in 4 years that's happening. Because I kind of I went from the 0 to 4, but so my other one is businesses are thriving and growing, and that's not just in downtown, that's all of Chico. Especially downtown, but all of Chico. And city spending / budget continues to be in balance and with good reserves and amazing staff running those departments, however you want to put that. But we've made great progress there. I would want it to be in 4 years that we're doing as well, if not better.
Great. So budget continues to be in balance and continued employee retention.
Yes.
Good. Anything else?
I have one more.
Please.
I put Arts and Culture Hub of the North State. Ambitious, but we could be it.
All right, putting it down here at the very bottom of it is least important. This is where we have space.
I understand.
Do you want to go down?
Great. So that 4 years, what I hear from you, and those are all very realistic, I think, in a lot of ways. I don't think anything, I was imagining coming in with my kind of outlandish ideas of examples of what, I want to, what could be all, not talking about me personally, but some might say, I want a Major League Soccer stadium, or I want a professional baseball team. Like, these things are way outside the scope, right? We're not going to talk about that in this conversation. But what's been talked about here, these are very realistic. And what I appreciate all the more is it's not even, we need downtown to be done. We're being realistic about our timing, that it takes a long time, right? We have to acknowledge, so even as we get into what are these strategic priorities, in order for downtown to make progress, you just talked about the objectives that need to take place, right? We need to write grants. We need to work with X, Y, and Z organizations, collaboration. We need to get contractors, all the different work that takes place. That's the nitty-gritty. Those are the specifics of getting to this idea of the conceptual reality. But if we don't have one without the other, I don't think we have the right target to focus on. So that's great. Now, that's 4 years. Very realistic goals, I would say. I didn't think anything was outlandish there. Is there anything different, and we'll come back to what you'd said as far as the tweaking and the fine-tuning, that you'd say in 2 years, it's different than these 4-year goals? Because it wasn't just a 4-year aspiration, it was a 2-year and a 0 to 1 year. So what does 2 years look like? Is there any difference there? And if it's okay, there's not. But I want to give time and space if there is.
So I'm not sure if there's a difference, but I would hope that we're on the road to 4. I mean, we should be making progress to 4 if we're not there with many of those different aspects, but we should be making progress, and that's really what you should be seeking, in my opinion.
Yeah, I struggled just slightly with the 2 years because it felt like 1 year makes sense. We can only do so much then. We're just getting started. 4 years is the vision. 2 years, one thing that I wrote was that we're securing grants for these things like the arts, bikeways, parks, wildfire resilience.
Yeah. I think we're well on our way. I'm going to go home now. And this conversation is, I'm not going to go home, don't worry. So I'm committed for the long haul. But that's the conversation we have to have, and I want us to have, and I appreciate that. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think in the 2-year time frame, we'll be part of the way to our 4-year goals. But also there are some things that are priorities that are threats that we have to deal with. So for example, our flood control structure, which is sort of under that's an imminent threat. So the things that are more immediate are going to get dealt with before, because we can't do everything at once, are going to be dealt with before the things that are less threatening.
That's right. Yep.
So I had, in order to get to the 4 years, under the 2 years, that we would be working our economic strategic plan. And going back to year one, you're going to hear in a minute that we have an economic strategic plan, that we have air service, because air services helps bring businesses. And Chico State is growing, and we're seeing higher enrollment because that goes to economy also. They have been growing, but growing even more.
Continuing to grow.
Not
Even back to where it was. I
Yeah.
know a lot of the metrics that we're looking at, whether it be Butte College or Chico State, they're looking at, we need to get back to X number, right? So as you talk about, it is growing, but continuing to grow. I think that this is exactly, I keep saying think. I don't think I know. This is exactly what I'm hoping will take place, because this does build on, right? So air service is important because it allows for a thriving business environment in ways that we don't have currently. Potentially, right? Same with CSU Chico. So if family can't get up to Chico easily, they may not want to send their children to Chico State. So this is exactly where we're kind of building blocks to get us a 4-year plan, where I'm hoping, and I didn't think anybody forewarned about this. In fact, I think Mike said, we're all curious to know where we're going today. So some mystery. So I appreciate that you're all playing along. It's working out just perfectly so far.
I have one last one. That Warren is done and proper secession planning has been implemented.
Succession?
Secession, post-Warren.
Post-Warren, oh, okay.
So
It's like
Warren's
Steve
gone.
at
It's,
that point,
no, it's done, and we've planned ahead of time, and that's being implemented.
Okay, yeah, so we're self-directed in our strategy.
Huh?
Like we're self-directed in our strategy now.
We are, yes. That we've done a great job, and we've done the hard work, and we've had the conversations, and we're moving forward.
What did you say on that? You said we're self-directed?
We're self-directed in our policy on homelessness. And yeah, and I think it's kind of like, sounds flowery perhaps, but in 2 years, if homelessness was not the most, like the hottest political topic, I think we would be doing a good job. And I'd like to see that.
For my 2-year goals, I put things I feel like can be achieved without necessarily having policymaking even take a part in that. And I mean cultural shifts, not only going back to community engagement and being as involved with our residents as possible, but also the way that we connect with other cities and other counties. I think there's a lot of recognition that what Butte County does will in turn affect Yuba, and what Chico does can affect Biggs and Orland. And I just hope that all of those elected officials can be in communication, not only in a structured official way, but also in communication in a leisurely way, because we want to be knowing what each other's cities and counties are going on.
So how would I sum that? North State collaborative resource?
Yeah.
Collaboration, or maybe increase in collaboration?
Yeah, increase in how often and how much we're communicating with each other, even in incremental small ways, I think can be achieved in 2 years.
Great, thank you.
I have a couple more if you're done. Okay. Planning efforts are in progress for transportation corridors and for meeting our housing needs. We have planning efforts in progress, but, furthering those towards our goals. Solid funding, continued funding, but perhaps more for our capital project needs for repaving our roads. Better and more local and interregional transit in partnership with BCAG. So like connections to Sacramento and to the Sacramento airport especially. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Other things, 2 years. So we're starting to whittle down a bit, right? So we go from 4 to 2, but we have to again, and I'll sound like a broken record, can't get 4 without 2, and you've already hit on that, so this is great. It's interesting, I'm just thinking aside, one of the things, and I can't remember who was it that said this, but this idea of having other communities look to Chico as a leader. Right, we're already seeing that some of the disaster recovery, obviously, the fact that these things took place are, of course, devastating, but the fact that we can turn our response, especially working in Paradise and the surrounding area with the campfire, and now having these other environments, communities look to Chico for support and help, whether it be in Maui or down in Los Angeles. We hate that we've had to go through it, but because we've gone through it a lot stronger, we can be a leader in what's looked to us. So I think we already have examples of looking, of seeing what that looks like where things are coming to us, so we can capitalize on a lot of the work that we've done and lead the way. So you've already said this, but to get to 4, we go to 2, but we have to start. So this is where the real work takes place, right? We say, okay, what do we want to do in the next year? Keeping in mind the 2-year plan, the 4-year plan, what is it that we must focus on in the next 0 to 1 years, right? The immediate need, the short term, right now, that will then set us up to be successful come the longer term, that 2 and the 4-year eventually, right? And some of this, I think it goes without saying, but I'll say it still, it's not going to be completed in 4 years, right? We're going to be in progress still in a lot of these projects. But what's the saying? When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago? When's the second best time? Today? Right, we have to start somewhere, so that's the idea. So should these trees be planted a while ago? Perhaps, but we have an opportunity right now to plant the trees today. Right, knowing that they will grow, but if we keep putting it off, they're never going to grow because they were never planted. Right, the idea that I never won the lottery. Why? Have you ever bought a ticket? No. Well, there's your problem, right? We have to start somewhere. So 0 to 1 year, what are the thoughts as we work through that? What does take place in the immediate?
So I had, trying not to put any specific department, but attract and hire staff, allow leadership to attract and hire the staff needed to have quality leadership and all positions filled. Not calling out that we need more in our fire department and other places, and we need a new fire station and, things like that. So anyways, but in all staffing, I know there's been a shortage on the second floor that we can't get certain things done in building because they don't have the correct people to check plans. So like at all level to make sure that we're giving staff what they need to be able to hire. That we begin the Warren, if it's not succession planning, whatever you want to call it, what life post-Warren looks like, begin that planning. Communication plan / transparency, optimizing our new PIO that we have to the best of her skills and abilities, and creating an economic strategic plan. That in 4 years we'll be thriving and growing from.
And you see this, and you say economic strategic plan, just for clarification, that's different than what we're doing today.
Yeah, like we're talking about the strategic plan for the city. I think one of the most important things that we have is an economic strategic plan that directs the decisions that we make and how we grow the economy in Chico, which goes down to the airport and planning and roads and roundabouts and all the other things that go underneath that.
Great, thank you.
So this is a hard one because in 2020 there was an inflection point. We had a shift in the philosophical orientation of the city council, and that will continue until at least 2026. And so a number of things were put in place and have been in motion over that period of time, and they center around 3 things: safety, infrastructure, and what I call the texture, quality of life, texture of life. And so safety, we had a police department that was melting down. We fixed that. We've identified a threat with the flood control system. We had one of our leaders in the fire department talk about the need for some enhanced fire protection downtown. Infrastructure, the sewers downtown were supposed to be replaced in 1983. They were put in 1908 and been neglected. So that's prompted the revisioning of the downtown because we have to tear the streets up, so we might as well rethink that. Roads, we have a 10-year road construction program. So, it's just continuing the things that we started, and I think we're on a very good track. And I would add Bidwell Park needs some love. Can I make a comment about the strategic economic plan? So having been involved in like deciding where companies locate other locations or where they locate, a lot of it just gets down to where do the people running it want to live? You've got to be near your raw materials. You have to have proper transportation. You got to have a labor force. All those considerations. But then it all gets down to, do I want to live there, right? And that gets back to the quality of civic life. So you got a great place to live. People, including people who run and own companies, are going to want to be there for that reason. And this kind of, wherever you go in the world, the culture is defined in smaller towns, not in big cities. Big cities have the same hotels, same Italian food around the world. It's towns like Chico and so we need to get that quality of life back because we've allowed it to degrade over the past, particularly in California, over the past 40 years or so. And that's shifting, and you can see it at the state level because we exist in this river that's flowing along, if you will, and we can make some decisions, but we're very impacted by what the state decides to do. And you can see that's what's happened in the state because Gavin Newsom wants to be president, is they're in the process of backtracking on a whole bunch of stuff that they've been doing for 40 years that wasn't working.
So what you're saying then is one builds on the next.
Yeah. If you have a great place to live, people are going to want to be there, including people who own and run businesses, right? And so you can have all the plans you want, but if you don't get the homeless people out of downtown and the parks, they're not going to come here.
I agree. I think I totally agree, Tom, that it needs to be, or Mr. Van Overbeck, that it's absolutely somewhere you want to be. But I think I'm more talking if I'm looking to relocate my business or I'm looking to open a second location, how friendly are we in the business environment? We just heard, for instance, of somebody who bought a lot and built the exact same thing in 3 different cities and kind of told what his experience was in each 3 of those cities. I want to be the easiest and the best city at that, not the most difficult and the worst and the highest fees. So as people are pulling their permits, and I'm not saying we were the worst, like, don't get me wrong, but if that's the case, what do we need to do to fix that? So I think the economic strategic plan is making sure when somebody is looking to relocate their business, are the access roads in and out of where they want to put that industrial, whatever it is, the best that we can be. So that's more what I was thinking. And of course, then all your employees that you bring to work in that business, that you want it to be great because we have a great quality of life here.
Yeah, and it's definitely not either or, it's both and, right? So we have to have both in order for that to be successful. And so those are the things that we get into the tactile of it, the very technical. What needs to take place in order for that to happen? It's, to your question earlier, yes, both. It's very good. So this is a great start. What else? 0 to 1 years.
Some things that I think we're already kind of on track for, just based on the things we've voted on together as a council, are decrease in blighted abandoned buildings, which is towards our better downtown. More arts programs as recommended by the Arts Commission. I'm excited to find out what those are. And I think we should be planning for the possibility of a recession, possible loss of federal programs and things that impact us. And I think that ties into the mayor's recommendation of the economic planning. planning ahead for smart growth so that we can have consistent tax revenue from our developments, and make sure that we're investing in infrastructure wisely through that. And staffing was already brought up for things like planning, code enforcement, homelessness, and community engagement.
So I had mentioned, as far as a long-term vision, the safe streets, safe parks, safe neighborhoods, thriving businesses, premier education, ample housing, and recreational opportunities. That was the bigger macro, and those are the long-term goals. But I think you have to have a short-term mission within that long-term goal, meaning an eye on the present. And you also need to realize, and we just need to be honest about this, you were talking about contingency for recessions or whatever, but Eisenhower, in his wisdom, said plans are worthless, planning is everything. And that is so true, right? We've all been through that, where you plan for something to happen, and then you have the dam crisis, then you have the campfire, then you have COVID, right? You don't plan for those things, but you have to have some element of planning. And really, that's where leadership comes in. And I really want to commend our staff and their leadership, led by Mark Sorensen, because he has that vision. They have that vision. They understand the long term and the short term, but also the flexibility and the ability to adjust to these different dynamics. So it's great that we have plans, but let's also remember we need to be planning for things that are really not something that we see on our radar. That's life. That's reality in Butte County right now, and our reality in Chico.
That's great. It's a great reminder. In fact, I have a slide to look at. Probably you can see it as you go through the printout. It's not as succinct as the Eisenhower quote, but the idea that we should not treat a strategic plan as a prophecy. Right? We know that there's the only certainty in life is uncertainty. And so as we are planning for, I love that you put, I put shorthand, but we should be planning for a possible recession. Right? But now, could we have planned for the pandemic that took place in 2020? Probably not, right? So there's lots of people have lots of takes on that, but you have to plan and anticipate, at least these days especially, given especially what we see in Butte County, that there's going to be, it's not one thing, it's the next thing. And so I love this sentiment. It's not just let's have a plan, but let's be planning for.
And remember, D-Day, that massive operation, they were landing on the wrong beaches, everything went wrong in the plan. That fell apart completely. But ultimately, the planning succeeded, that leadership succeeded, and the overall plan succeeded because of that.
That's good. What else?
To echo some of the points that Mr. Van Overbeck and Mayor Reynolds touched on, as far as economy goes, I think diversify as far as industries go. In any town or any city, there's always going to be those core businesses where we're getting a lot of those tax revenues from, but it's always a dangerous place to be, to have to rely on just one or two industries. I think my perspective coming from the suburbs of San Diego, every single store is a chain probably owned by the same 6 parent companies, and that's something that's really special about Chico that I think draws a lot of people in. And then secondly, the 0 to 1 year, I put the city council itself is flexible and creative in our solutions and are willing to make compromises to at least kickstart a project. And I think I put that for the 0 to 1 year because that's how I feel the current city council is functioning now. I've seen a lot of flexibility from my coworkers, and when I'm envisioning the next year, I just really hope that we can continue that.
Thank you.
I'd like to see us this year take some really decisive direction on a couple of issues that are typically conflict-ridden. We always try to strike a balance. We always strike some sort of balance, but I want to see us give some really straightforward guidance. And one is about street safety, and even if it comes at the expense of how fast people are used to driving around. And we don't have to wait till we spend $10 million to tear up a road to make sure that kids can ride their bike safely to school, and parents can be comfortable about that. And the other is that we're going to have more housing opportunities throughout the city, even though things are going to change and people are going to be uncomfortable with that, and we're going to continue to hear that. But I think the direction that we want to give from the council, and I think this is generally well felt, is that we really want to lean hard in favor of increasing housing within the city.
That's great. Thank you. Anything else? This is not one of those speak now or forever hold your peace, because we have an hour and 42 minutes still that we can continue to have the conversation, and we will. So we're going to revisit this. We just talked about it. We can do a couple things. We can break right now for 10 minutes and finish out the rest, or we can go for another 30 and take a break. What's your preference? Okay, good. So if we need to break, yeah, just let me know. And I'll probably start to see eyes glazed over, right? So my mother's a kindergarten teacher, and she went to a seminar, and the person speaking was a neuroscientist, and he said, if you ever lose the attention of your class, all you have to do is take your hand and wave in front of their face. And so I always tell that story in my classes, and I don't wave my hand in front of their face, I wave in front of my face, but telling the story in and of itself, the intended consequences, I've just brought everybody back into focus, much like we just did right now. So let's talk about strategy a little bit more, and then we're going to get down to the nuts and bolts of how do we make this happen. And you've already heard these things in some ways, but again, let's go back to the teacher and me. When we talk about strategy, there's a number of things we have to keep in mind. So every organization must operate in an environment that's marked by competition, structural forces, and uncertainty. We already talked about these things, right? So the competition is that we have a number of people, right? We have a large city. What is it? The population, I'm sure. I've always wondered, as an aside, as I drive into Chico and I pass the Welcome to Chico sign, is somebody literally there every time a baby is born, just adding another number to that? I'm sure that's not the case, but that's always been my thought. And then I come on the other side of Chico and the number is different, so I'm not really sure which one it is, but let's just call it 110,000, okay, for round numbers. But everybody has different priorities. And so there's this competition where we may not say, well, what's the competition of Chico? We're not a business entity or a nonprofit even. And at the same time, there are lots of competitors that we face, right? Surrounding communities, to your point, as far as ease of perhaps building projects or businesses. And so thinking through, what is the competition? But what we just heard is we want to make sure that we're the easiest city, municipality, and we want to collaborate with our partner and community, our neighbors. So now in Los Angeles, and you've referenced San Diego, your neighbor is literally on the other side of a street. Here in Chico, being more rural, we have some distance between us and Oroville, even Paradise and other places, but still, folks are making choices. Do they want to live in Chico? Do they want to open a business in Paradise? Things of that nature. So competition is definitely there. Structural forces, and of course, as we talked about, this idea of uncertainty. Every organization must make choices that fit together in a holistic, consistent way in order for us to succeed in that environment. So you've just all laid this out. Basically what I'm doing is I'm reading back to you the things that you've already said, which tells me that either you saw my slides ahead of time, which you might have, that's okay, or these are already on your mind as it is, which is another great point, that we're in this together, right? This idea, like, if we get to 4, we have to go to 2, we have to go to 1, but in order for those things to take place, we must go through these steps. These realities must take place for us to get from year 1 to 2 to 4, right? They build on each other. We talk about an economic strategic plan. What needs to take place? It's the conversation that was just had between the two of you. It's not either or, it's both and. We must have air traffic, right? We must have an airport, we must have quality of life, civic life, right? So there has to be an attraction. So they have to fit together in order for that to be successful. And then these choices, these are the essence of what we're talking about when it comes to strategy. So I told you I'd do some teaching. And with that, you have to read books. And I used to not like reading books, and now I love reading books. And when I was in graduate school, I read every single page of every single book, and I can say that I read every single word on every single page. I'm pretty sure my kids don't do that, nor do my students. Nor do I anymore these days, but I really like to bring examples of kind of where do I get my resources, knowing that it's not just me coming up with these wild, haired ideas. So one of my favorite strategy books is a book called Playing to Win, How Strategy Really Works. And the authors give us a framework that I think is really helpful for us to talk through. How do we then come up with our strategic goals in this conversation? And you can see them in front of you, you can see them up here on the slides, but there's these 5 realities that we need to explore. And in the strategic choice framework, they say strategy is defined by an integrated, iterative set of 5 choices within a particular macro environmental context. So, Councilmember O'Brien, this idea of the macro, we're talking about this macro, but it spills into the micro, as we've just discussed. So, and again, I mentioned earlier that the language may not be completely applicable in this conversation, but we'll use some replacements. So what is our winning aspiration, okay? So let's just look at that. What do we want to accomplish? We already talked about a lot of that. We have page after page after page of what success, if you want to use that terminology, looks like. In the long term, the short term, and the immediate. Then the question comes into play, where are we going to play, right? You already know what your scope of kind of purview and where you have oversight and all of that. You know where those kind of areas to play are. But this gets to more than just location. It gets to what are the areas of focus, right? What's our strategic goals? And so you would say, if we're going to play, if we want to, this is what we aspire to. This is where we must play. And then this idea of how do we win? Okay, so and maybe that's not the right language, but let's replace that with how will we know we've been successful? And that's what we just laid out here. So if we know that I want to accomplish this, and this is a space that we have agreement, we have collaboration, we have buy-in, we have insight, we can go back to those 5 most important questions, and if they're addressed, who's our customer? What is our customer value? Right, on the large macro level, let's take it down to the micro level, then we know what success is going to look like as we think about strategy. And then this idea of what capabilities must we have. Who was it that said, I think I wrote down here, something along the lines of a strategic communication plan. Was that you, Mayor Reynolds? Yeah. So how do we communicate? How do we have an engaged community in the city of Chico? How do we have even more transparency than we already have? How do people know what's going on? These are the capabilities we're talking about. Transparency, communication, having our new, I don't know if she's here, the PIO, as you mentioned, right? So those are the important capabilities. And then we look at, okay, so in order for all that to take place, what management systems are needed? So processes and people. So we talked about staff. Not only do we need to retain staff, because we have good staff, we need to hold on to them, but we need to attract staff, which is not something it doesn't operate in a silo, right? So we need to attract staff, and sometimes that means having people move to Chico. And I will tell you, as someone who does, in addition to strategic planning, I do executive recruiting. Finding people to move from some of these larger metropolitan areas to a place like Chico is a challenge. For lots of different reasons. It could be housing, it could be pay, it could be the position, it could be the organization, or the lack thereof. So what management systems do we need? Again, processes and people. So if you look at it, much like we've talked through, we walked the other way. We worked from 4 to 2 to 1. We're looking at this. This is a waterfall effect. What's our winning aspirations? This cascade. Where will we play? How will we win? What capabilities must we have? What management systems do we need? And then, of course, we go back to what's our mission. So what's our why? Who's our customer? What do they value? What are our results? And what are our plans? So you've probably heard it said that if you don't know what you're aiming at, you're never going to know if you hit the goal. So now's our time to focus in on that. What are we aiming at? So if these things take place, let's start with 0 to 1 and work the other way now. We know what our desired future looks like, and we can kind of hone in on that. But what needs to take place in the here and now? We do that by way of making SMART goals. So, and these are, you can see this in front of you, the colors are kind of not great. Sorry about that. It's what I could find. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And so here's where those comments, I think, Councilmember Goldstein, you said, I don't know if this is the how or the what, but this is where maybe it matters all the more. And where I will actually say, is it a SMART goal, right? Is it specific? Is it measurable? Maybe it's specific and measurable, but is it attainable? Maybe it's all 3, but is it relevant? right? And is it timely? And so not just timely, but we would then want to tie markers to it and say we're going to accomplish X by way or by this certain date. So again, as I mentioned, we don't want this to just be some theoretical exercise. This is, let's put some things into practice, right? You want to walk away with outcomes. And I want you to walk away with outcomes. That's the whole purpose of this. And I think we have a lot of, again, kind of more theoretical or philosophical outcomes. But now let's actually brass tacks it. Let's get down to the nitty gritty and make these things happen. So what I want to do here is I want us to look through again this idea of the 4-year. Every homeless individual is housed and given the necessary treatment. Now I'm kind of giving you a snapshot of that. You said you want your grandkids to safely ride through Bidwell Park. So in order for us to get you a 6 and a 10-year-old, I'm assuming, grandkid, or you have a 6-year-old now, 10-year-old then, there's a lot that takes place over the span of a child's life in those 4 years. And there's a lot that takes place in the span of Chico over those 4 years. We want the city to build upon and look at the things that are working to mitigate risk. Use what's working, being utilized already. Let's not recreate the wheel. I think a comment that was made by Councilmember O'Brien is we've already had some, or maybe it was Councilmember Van Overbeek, there's been a lot of great movement. Let's not recreate things. Let's pick up what's already been done, or let's capitalize on those things so that we're not revisiting and coming up with them as though they're a new idea, because sometimes they're not, right? That's not the best use of time. Affordable housing, lower rate of pedestrian cycle collisions. I think I wrote this down right. More students walking back to school. I just put fix the potholes, wildlife, flood reduction, higher civic engagement. And somebody just said, we want in 4 years the homelessness issue to be solved. So as we look through these ideas, again, we go safer streets, safer parks. There's a lot of safety here. If we were to walk through and go, these are our SMART goals. In order to get to that desired outcome, we first need to decide what that desired outcome is. So as we look at this, let's go back to the 0 to 1. We want to attract and hire staff to have all positions filled. Okay. We want to begin the planning of a post-Warren reality. So I think, Councilmember Winsley, you said self-directed plan, correct? Communication plan, transparency, PIO. Create an economic strategic plan. Bidwell Park needs some love. You've already been dealing with this with the blighted buildings. That's actually a word that I've never really been aware of until I read it in the newspaper this morning, so now it's been reiterated, so I appreciate a lesson that I even got there. More arts programs, street safety. So what is it now, as we kind of boil it down and say, these are specific? What is it that you would say, again, let's throw out all these ideas. What are the, let's go top to you, and we've already talked about some of this. What's the number one thing, and we're just going to go around, that we need immediate focus on to get to those desired futures? And I think we've already heard it, but I want you to actually go around and say, I want to focus here, because what we want to do is this. We want to go through a democratic process, and we want to say, okay, so here's where I had 5 of these, I had 4 of these, and I had 3 of these, right? It seems very simple and simplistic to go that approach, but at the same time, if we have uniform agreement that those are the most important priorities, then that's what we spend our time focused on. So I think I heard, I don't think, I know I heard homeless. I heard safety. I heard business, econ, development. I heard arts. I heard streets, infrastructure, potholes. What have I not captured here? Again, we talked through a lot, but the things that are specifically mentioned by you, what's not on this list here?
I think it's the textural stuff, you know, the quality of the park, the downtown, once you deal with mitigating the threats, what are the things that make Chico a joyful place to be? You know, quality of the bike infrastructure. If you're a bike rider, you know.
Disaster resilience, like wildfire and flooding.
So I put flood, fire, and
okay.
I knew you were going to go there.
You were already writing it when I thought of it.
So flood fire mitigation, though.
Sure.
Response?
Any of them, really.
Okay.
I think you covered it.
Okay.
To me, so many of these things are all wrapped together when it comes to like economic development, safety, homelessness, but housing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So what should be separated out then? And what can we include in them? Because here's what we want to go through this process. We want to say, okay, let's focus on these, let's call it 6 things total. And what's separate? And then we get down to, okay, where do we direct dollars from that? How do we make it happen? Like, let's actually go through, in the last part of our time together, we'll go through, we'll come out with, okay, in order for that to take place, this needs to happen. This needs to happen. This needs to happen. And here's the beauty of this. Like I said at the beginning, we're not going to finish everything today. And so what we're coming up with right now is our best. Our brains are already tired. It's the afternoon, and we just had lunch. We revisit this, and we continue to hone this and get it to where it's specific, and we send iteration after iteration until the council says, yes, that's it. That's the focus. We have ad hoc committees, whatever that looks like. I don't know how that process would necessarily go with this situation, but my commitment, again, is that we work on this until we're done. We figure out what's this plan of, and you have in front of you the 3 to 5 goals. Right now we have more than that, but you just said some of these fit together. So if they fit together, let's not, again, have them be separate, but let's figure out what's going to be part and parcel so we can really specifically focus the goals on something else.
So, Jeff, don't we need to prioritize these? I mean, in my mind, you have to deal with the threats first, which means that safety is number one. And safety breaks down into fire, flood, and personal safety.
So yes, we do have to prioritize, but we need to agree what's first at large, our most important focus, and then we put it in practice. Okay, so this is the most important thing. This builds on this. That's one approach we can take.
So I'm going to agree with Tom as well. I think you have to have priorities, and the fundamental thing that a government agency provides, whether it's local, state, or at the national level, is safety. Safety comes first. Safety is foundational. It really allows everything else to be built upon. If you do not have a safe foundation, we've seen that throughout California and parts of cities or whole cities that have been destroyed because they're unsafe. Safety is paramount. That comes first. Police, fire, and infrastructure.
Yeah, and I like to emphasize the infrastructure aspect of that.
So it seems like we've come down to, so if you've got, let's call it safety, business, economic development, and quality of life. Let's just, like, for an example, I'm not saying it is those, but to me, homelessness falls under safety because safety of the unhoused individuals and safety of the rest of the community. So to me, that's a safety issue for both. Quality of life, I think having amazing arts is a quality of life. Being flood and fire resistant is going to allow us to have a good quality of life. And a good streets and infrastructure. So it almost, under business and economic development, if we don't have the right streets and infrastructure, then we can't grow our business and our economy the right way. So it kind of seems like to me anyways, that's how I kind of see that list.
Yeah. Sorry, in addition to that, I immediately saw arts and economic development right next to each other, and I'm like, well, those go extremely hand in hand. If we're looking at economic development and businesses without focusing on the arts in some capacity, or looking at art projects without thinking about them and from a business perspective, we're missing something.
That's great. Thank you.
So, Jeff, so to me, quality of civic life is the overarching vision of the kind of place we want to live in. And how we get there is safety. What else we have? Economic development, arts. So it's not a goal in itself. It is the result of doing these other things right.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yep. So the answer is yes. Right? This is the process. This is the hope. Like you wake up, you put it in a program like this. You hope that the conversation goes in this direction, because this is what we're talking about. We have to have the overarching. And so that's again, and we want to go to have a discussion about this if this is a priority. But it sounds like we're moving those directions. if this is the overarching, we have to have boom, 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 boom. So I'm hearing, let's look at, so this idea, quality of life, so quality of civic life, okay? Is anybody, any reason you say, I don't agree with that?
Say it one more time.
Does anybody disagree that quality of civic life is of the kind of preeminent importance here? And everything then falls underneath that. It's in many ways it's a catch-all, but it's an important catch-all. Because that's what all of this builds towards, right? And we're saying that we have a goal, the next 4 years, we want to see X, Y, and Z happen. That's great, but we want to work towards, to be a work in progress towards, some would say, restoring quality of civic life, renewing, or just creating in general, right? We all have different experiences. We've seen these at different kind of stages in the life of Chico, and so we have different perspectives on how we might define that, but I think we all agree that quality of civic life is the umbrella of the most important aspect, unless I hear any dissent, but I don't have had so far. So are we okay to put that at the top?
I think it's a good summary.
Okay.
You can always move it.
Because here again, this, and it goes back to the early on conversation this morning, the why. Why are you all here? Why are you doing this work? Because you all have the goal to pursue, to develop, to create a quality of civic life that makes this place attractive for employees, for businesses, for families, for students. I mean, go down the list. And if we work through all of this, and this is the preeminent why for why you show up every other Tuesday, I think it is, and why you sit in all these other meetings, and why you came on a Wednesday in the middle of the week to sit through a 4-hour strategic planning session, is because you all have the same interest to develop a holistic, thriving quality of civic life for the city of Chico. I'm just going to put QOL, civic life. And we know what that means, quality of civic life. So if this is our major goal, what are our priorities to make that happen? Thinking through budget cycle, upcoming fiscal year, building on 0 to 1, 2 years out, 4 years out.
I was going to expand upon that and say safety from ongoing and immediate crises, because that can encompass homelessness, it can encompass climate disasters, it can encompass disasters from other threats.
Okay. So this is, I think, we could say just safety, and we could have this as kind of a parenthetical, because safety is in response to we need to prepare for and make a place safe for any and all threats. Right? So it could, I hear what you're saying exactly, but I think that if we just had safety as the goal, then we look at, okay, so if that's our goal, if that's goal, strategic goal number 1, what are the objectives to respond then to safety? Does that make sense?
And you may want to say a safe community, because there's many aspects of that community that need to be factored in when we talk about safety, safe schools, safe neighborhoods, those types of things. So a safe community, I think, encompasses what we are trying to accomplish as it relates to safety.
I hear that. Does that sound good?
So I think in terms of physical safety, so it's fire, flood, and what the police do, and personal safety. So are you looking for like specific things? I can give you some examples. So for instance, fire, we've had too much experience with that here. The single number 1 threat we have for fire is in Bidwell Park. If we get a fire going there in the summer and everything dries out. So we're pursuing 2 things. One is we're spending more money on vegetation management to clear out the underbrush, and we're going to forbid homeless people from camping, because then they build fires and the fire department has had to go out and deal with that. And as it relates to personal safety, the most dangerous thing you can do in this town is either get on a bike or in a car and drive on our public streets. We kill 10 or 12 people every year in traffic accidents in the city limits because we didn't have a full-time traffic officer for budgetary reasons. So we're putting in place not only more traffic officers, but a red light camera system, which is in the works. So those are specific things to address immediate threats.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I want to go there, but I want us to get our priorities as far as the top 3 to 5, and then what you just listed out, those are what we need to do to make that become reality.
But the encompassing thing we're trying to accomplish is a safe community, which includes all those things.
Absolutely. So we want an overarching strategic goal that says a safer or a safe community, however you want to phrase that. So if we look at this, we look at a document, okay, the document that's been referenced, we're going to put on the wall or where it is at the dais, and you can say, we're doing this because it supports our strategic goal of creating an even safer community. And so that then goes down the list of all the objectives that actually make that reality. Right? So if we say that's number 1, then by default we say if that's our priority, then that's where we're going to spend money. We're going to focus our attention and our budget on creating a safe community. Right? And so this is, I'm hearing from all of you, this is strategic goal number 1. This is the priority. This is number 1. Is that correct? And again, we'll get into the specifics of the objectives, but if this is our overarching goal number 1, we landed on a safe community.
And so to me, it seems like business economic development has to be number 2, because if we don't have thriving businesses that are paying taxes, that are paying for our staff and our streets and our roads and our infrastructure, then we can't create the safe community.
Yeah, I'm kind of struggling to see like how we're going to tie all this down in like really firm ways, because we can jump to like these examples like Councilmember Van Overbeck gave of things that we're doing now, but you can wrap things up in so many different ways. And so I have like our general plan here, this is our 2030 vision, that's 5 years out. And there's a lot of emphasis on sustainability, which can be seen as like, we're altruistic towards the environment or something, but also it's about sustainability of public services and us being able to maintain in the long run these things that cost a lot of money, but keep us safe and keep our quality of life strong. And I feel like we could be, wrapping all of this under that in a certain way. But at some certain points, it's just about verbiage. I'm not sure I have the answer to what to do there, but I just thought I'd point that out.
Sustainability goes back to having a strong economy and business economy and arts economy too. And that's why I do like that as an overarching term, because we're not just talking about, usually when we're talking about sustainability, we're only thinking about the environment, when that in turn extends also to downtown being sustainable and thriving and our economy being sustainable.
So one of our business leaders in town says, look around. Anything you see that was built because of business. And I think after safety, we have to have a thriving economy, a thriving economic environment. As the mayor said, I think that has to be number 2, because number 1, the foundation is safety. Businesses will not come where it's not safe. Once it's safe, you create that environment, then they come in and do their thing. And we have to have that thriving economy as well.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you have to have a thriving economy, but there have to be some foundational elements. And I would argue that once you make the place safe, you got to make it work, which says infrastructure. The roads can't be full of potholes. The sewer system, it can't be on the verge of breaking. All the infrastructure stuff that we're in the middle of doing. That has to be, the town has to work, and not only public but private. We've got some real issues with power costs now because of PG&E, and are there ways to deal with that? And we're taking some steps. But I think infrastructure is, and that was neglected here for decades, and there's been a real focus. The other thing I want to inject is we have a superb city staff. And so we have the ability to execute on this stuff, which is not normal.
So my position was safety includes police, fire, and infrastructure. That's all inclusive in that, Tom, from my perspective. That's why I kept that as a single item.
that's,
I think there are several different aspects of infrastructure, though, and I was thinking about the term sustainability and how we need to make sure that our sewers and our streets are sustained financially, which also ties into the economic development and the staffing. So I would say sustainability is more of like within that combined larger overarching quality of civic life goal. But yeah, I'm seeing infrastructure being in both of these, not necessarily just in safety.
And that's okay, right? That we see both.
keep things complex and try to simplify things. And a lot of my conversations with people about like quality of life here, what are the biggest issues that face people, and about economic development too, is about affordability more generally. And so, yeah, Councilmember Ben Overbeck mentioned power costs, housing costs is usually the one that is up there, but it's also things about, you know, managing our infrastructure means we need to have contractors locally with workers who can afford to live here. And I see that as like, especially something that is somewhat tangentially within our power to affect economic development, is affordability is like, we got to be high on our list.
Related to that, I was thinking about the three different lots that a developer was developing, and I think one of the main reasons why Chico was seen as harder to develop in was the higher costs of land, and of course, you know, that's a whole issue, but also the cost of housing and recruiting workers could perhaps be a disservice to some of our businesses that might want to thrive here.
I really love this conversation. I think it's the right conversation. Again, I keep saying thing. I don't know why I do that. I know it's the right conversation. But when I hear this idea, you know, I appreciate the looking at the plan. So it's sustainability. I see it almost as a viability. So are we viable short-term and long-term? And so are we sustainable, right? That speaks to the environmental aspect. It also speaks to the economic aspect, right? You talk about the triple bottom line. We're talking about people, profits, and planet, right? We're talking about all three of them. But that gets to this idea of long-term viability. And so we're building for a long-term viable future here in Chico that does not discount or not include any of the aspects that just been talked about. And so perhaps, if I can offer, viability might be not necessarily more accurate, but maybe more apt word to use than sustainability, because it includes all that's just been discussed. I'll start out there, but what do you think about that?
I like it.
So if we do viability, are we talking a viable community? Are we talking, or just viability overall? Because then that is going to include business economic development, it's going to include environmental. Right?
Sustainable, yeah,
All
of
those
those.
different things that we just talked through, and then we have goals and the objectives that fit under long-term viability.
Long-term viability is, to me, by doing all those things, we're going to ensure we have long-term viability, and every decision that we make should be going back to that, is ensuring the long-term viability, because that goes back to the grandchildren, goes back to the everything that we talked about in the beginning of why we're doing this. It's for long-term viability. So I like that word.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Being sustainable is part of, you know.
We could make a lot of really bad short-term decisions, and the city has done that in the past, and some on staff currently recognize that very acutely. But we have to keep an eye on the future, and it's not going to be something we will necessarily benefit from. We may, but it's those people down the road that you have to think of as well.
Yeah, we're talking in many ways legacy issues here as well, right? So things that may take place beyond our time, whether it be on the council or just here on Earth at the same time, right? That long-term viability, and for some of us we may not think that way, but it's reality, right? So we have to be thinking long-term. So if I just put long-term viability, is that a good catch-all for strategic priority number 2? Okay. So if we go say, so some of these have been included in that. Is there a third? And like I said, if I said we were going to do 17 and we came up with 2, you'd be like, man, that guy was terrible. But if I said we're going to do 1 and came up with 2, then I just doubled what you're hoping for. So if we do 2, that's great. But if we do 3, we want to make sure that it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely, with those objectives that they include. Or can we make an argument that these are the 2 most important priorities, and all of this falls under it, that creates the future that we want to see here in the city of Chico, both today, but also, more importantly, in the long term?
This might fit under another umbrella. I just want to throw it out there, having a thriving core. I think we all saw the study attached to the Downtown Chico Business Association fee assessment thing, and having a thriving downtown and a really strong core is integral to so many of those things on the right-hand side. I just don't know how to encompass that in one word.
I think talk about like the park as the jewel of Chico and us, that we really like this area, and we attract people to this area because of the beauty of our natural surroundings. And there's some way to wrap all that up. Like I see this safety, long-term viability, it's like bread and butter. And so now we want to it's like, what's our jam on top? And there can, there's downtown aspects, the arts, the aesthetics, the park, the beauty, and I think we all feel like we should always keep that in mind, and that's what we see about Chico as being good. Isn't just that we're like a safe box to live in, but that it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, and you just touched on this, but the fact that our park overlaps with our downtown is super unique. We have one of the largest urban forests in the United States, and that's really special.
Yeah, that's great. This morning you said this is a unique, special, beautiful, and some people said joyful place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody can say that about the place they live.
Can we just put goal 3, fun?
So could I want to expand on something that Councilperson Hawley said about the importance of the downtown. I'm not sure it belongs here, but since you brought it up. The university is a major driver economically for the town. It's the major driver, and and one of the major employers. And because it is unique in the state college system, California State College system, we have a downtown right next to the university. They border each other. So the perception of the quality of the downtown and the safety of the downtown impacts the ability of the university to recruit. And so this isn't just the sort of generic, we need to restore our downtown. It is critical to the future of this town that we have a viable, interesting, safe downtown. So I'm agreeing with you. Thank you for bringing it up.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So how do we then, do we just put downtown? Is that something that we have agreed with? We say, yes, this is.
I think it's more than just downtown.
Yeah, I think it's more than just downtown.
I think downtown is, of course, the core of the thing, but I really want it to reflect however we say that in a few words, that this is about like vibrancy of downtown and our whole city.
If you want to identify the core, I've always said the 3 jewels of Chico State are downtown and Bidwell Park. Those are the 3 cores of Chico. If you think about Chico, you always think about those 3 things, always.
And they're differentiators, which is really important. I would add Sierra Nevada, but.
I think they're doing all right for themselves.
What comes to mind for me is a thriving core. When we say the word core, I think people usually know what we're talking about.
We could say like thriving community core, I don't know, or vibrant.
And in some ways,
I
like the wordsmithing that's taking place here, but ultimately what's most important is what's underneath this goal. Right? Mm-hmm. This is the catch-all. It says this is our focus, but then the objectives, okay, so what does that mean, right? So you could just say a thriving core. And someone might look at that and go, what does that mean? Well, one, it gives an opportunity to talk about it, right? The mayor's minute, if you will. Maybe it would take longer than a minute to do that. But also then this is how we're focused on it. These are the most important things to us. This is what employers tell potential employees. If you come to Chico, you can not only experience the beautiful outdoors of not just lower, middle, but upper park. I saw somebody describe riding their mountain bike in Upper Park as riding in their own Grand Canyon, which I thought that's a bit of a stretch. Because the Grand Canyon is, of course, the Grand Canyon, but at the same time, this individual saw it as his personal Grand Canyon, his playground. Not many people can say that about a park. There's something special about that. So if you put a thriving core, then we literally put our money where our mouth is and say we're going to support that thriving core, defined as these 3 items, if you will. We have 4th, Sierra Nevada, they're doing all right. So what can we as a community, what can we as a municipality do to support these 3? Then you have your objectives spelled that out.
How about protect and grow the core? protect and grow the core.
You know, I feel like it's not just the core, it's like the connection of the rest of the community to the core, and the fact that we're like a compact city, but that we have natural surroundings, which are not in our core, but it's just like a mile that way, you get into some orchards, and we have these greenways that run through, and it's the connectivity of it all that together conveys the sense of place that we like about Chico.
Yeah, I won't die on this hill, but the word accessibility did come up in the beginning multiple times. So a thriving and accessible core, but we can shorten that more.
Maybe you say prioritize the core, and that encompasses all that we've just discussed.
I think I'd go a different direction, in my opinion. Like, I've talked to business owners in District 7 who want the council to consider more than just downtown, and I like that we're talking a lot about downtown, but I think I want to make sure that we're looking at the things that we really love about downtown, how to make downtown great, and expanding those things to the rest of the city as much as we can. And so I would focus on a word like community or something to that effect.
We have talked about community engagement in a different perspective, more of transparency, but the more thriving our core is, perhaps the more engaged the community will be. The more protected the park is, the more engaged the community will be. The more, I mean, if you think long term, you think about the student population that comes to Chico State, we want to give them a reason to stay in Chico when they come as students. So now we're talking about, again, yes, long-term viability, but we protected the core. And really, if, as you say, Chico State is the major economic driver for the community, it's the core, right? So, and without it, we've seen the ramifications of a dip in enrollment. And we're still, I mean, they obviously are working their way through that, but it impacts the community of Chico. So I don't think that what we're saying, actually, there's no division here. It's just, we want to have something that we can capture that, and then the so what do we do with it now spills out the objectives. So it could be protecting, right?
All
We
right.
just have to agree on something.
You're selling me on it. I like it.
Well, it's a way to encapsulate it all, and you know, we're talking about like beauty and aesthetic value and these like things that we like. I'm looking at like the overall vision for Chico in 2030, and the last line is, above all, Chico is a place we're proud to call home. And there's a lot of mentions of sense of place, you know, which is a really neat term, but also it's like sense of what sort of place. I do think that in the last several years, Chico suffered with that a little bit. There's been a lot of like self-flatulation, self-shaming of Chico, you know, for these issues that we have, disasters that we've had. And I do think we want to try to like recover that like pride of place. And there's something to, with downtown and Bidwell Park, these are things we talk about when we talk about the pride that we have in our place. And so that's the one option there is just like enhancing that pride of the city that we're in, the place.
Again, I don't want us to necessarily get so hung up on how we capture it, but I do think we need to have something that we agree on.
Yeah.
So we can come up with objectives.
Do we all sort of agree on the vibe of like a thriving community core, that sort of thing?
Or protecting what makes Chico Chico, right? There is a, like you said, a vibe, a sense of this community. There's a lot of things that make that up, and people live here because of that. I live here because of that. My family's here because of that, and protecting and building upon that. What that exactly looks like wordsmith-wise, I don't know, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's something very unique about this place. It is somewhat difficult. Why do you love it so much? I just do. And you can't necessarily put it into words. And if someone forces you to do so, it becomes very difficult to do, and we end up having a 20-minute conversation about how do we describe the thing that we like the most about the place that we live.
Well, there's a unique culture here. It's different than other towns. And so I came here full-time, roughly 10 years ago, and so I could see the differences. And I think a lot of that as a result of our history, but also where we are. We're close to the mountains, and we have this gorgeous park. So we get a lot of people here that are very outdoor-oriented. They want to ride bikes, mountain bikes, road bikes, whatever. And so all those things are intertwined, but getting back to the three elements that Mike O'Brien defined that differentiate us. It's the university and the downtown and the park. And because they're differentiators, that's leverage. So we make what's good better, and that impacts everything positively.
Yeah, I agree with that. Doesn't mean that we ignore the rest of the community. Absolutely not. But those three things do drive a lot of, like I said, what makes Chico. And I think building upon that, not ignoring everything else, but I think building upon that allows everything else to build as well.
For sure.
So for that third one, just so we can get to the next part, can we call it Downtown Park CSU for right now? And then we can wordsmith like how we're going to capture that later. Because I think we're all in agreement that that's what it is. It doesn't mean Park Avenue is not important because there's huge investment going on down there and there's huge things happening there. But just to get us to that next step, it feels like maybe we call it that until we figure out that exact. And then we also have to remember, this is the city's strategic plan. So we can only, the decisions that we make can affect what happens at Chico State, but we're largely not in charge of Chico State, but a thriving downtown helps with Chico State. So they are intermixed, but we need to remember this is our strategic plan and what are we going to do to ensure that we're protecting those things and the park.
And the beauty of this is it's recorded, so if someone says, well, what about us? We have on record that we said, no, we're not ignoring the other aspects, right? We're targeting the specific things that we're saying, what will have the biggest impact, right? So there's lots of things we could focus on, but we actually want to discuss what has the biggest impact on the largest population so that we can carry out the strategic goals that we have assigned, right? So we as a council said this is most important, this is having an impact to create a higher and better quality of civic life for all in Chico. So we have these three. We didn't take a break, we're going to come back and finish out. Are we missing anything that needs to be on the list of our strategic priorities, strategic goals, how we kind of phrase that out? I think this captures most everything, if not everything, of what we talked about. But if it hasn't, I want to make sure we get that on paper so we can continue down that path.
It feels like there's probably a place within each of those three goals for all the things we've talked about.
That's right. Absolutely. Good. It's 2:04. Are we okay for a 6-minute break?
All right.
Or ish. Yeah. So come back no later than 2:15. How about that? And we'll finish out objectives. And if I'm nothing else, I'm timely, and we will be done at 3 p.m. Okay. All right. 2:15. Yep, he's right here. Oh, your name tag's hidden back here.
We're hiding.
Yeah, that's right. You sat there intentionally so the cameras couldn't see you. So, yeah. So. All right, 2:15 on the dot. We have a hard stop at 3 p.m. And as I mentioned this morning, there's a likelihood we won't get absolutely everything accomplished, and that's okay. But we want to give it our dead level best, right? So to get everything we can. So over the break, I wish I could say this was original to me, but I have to give credit where credit is due. Jen McCarthy suggested here for number 3, protect and enhance our primary community assets. What do you think about that?
I like it.
All right, let's go with it. So I'll give you a chocolate later on or something like that. So perfect, good. All right, so that said, now we got to figure out what do we do with this. Okay, so what's going to be included? If our overarching here is quality of civic life, okay, this is our big idea. Then we've said that our top 3 strategic goals, priorities, however you want to phrase them, are a safe community, long-term viability, and again, we can define what that means with the objectives. And then number 3 is to protect and enhance our primary community assets. This is where we get down to it. How do we do that? And so in the next 43 minutes, we want to talk about the objectives that we have for these three. These are our big rocks right here, right? The question is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? And somebody asked me, I put this up on a slide before, they said, why do you have an elephant bathing in a cup of coffee with a cookie next to it? And I said, I don't know. It's the one that came up when I searched for how do you eat an elephant. So we're going to go with this picture right here. And we're going to talk about what bites of this elephant need to be taken, okay? So I want us to take some time, and not a lot of time, because we want to have a discussion about these items, but I would like you, on the worksheets you have in front of you, knowing that these are our three goals, again, safe community, long-term viability, protect and enhance primary community assets, I want you to write down, how do we do that? And maybe write down just one or two items, maybe three at the most. What are the key objectives, so the deliverables that actually carry this out? Because just having these three ideas, that's nice, right? I want a safer community, I want it to be a long-term viable community, and I want to protect the gems of Chico. But how do
So you had safety crossed out and you have something written underneath it, which I can't read.
a safe community?
Oh, safe community,
Yeah,
okay.
safe community, sorry. So we had safety, but then we talked through this, really what we're talking about is safety.
Do you want us to like come up with goals for each one of these, or sorry, things for each one of these goals, or just kind of all
Yeah,
ideas?
come up with individual objectives for
Okay,
each
great.
of these three goals.
Jeff, do we get to grade you at the end of this?
I hope so.
Okay, you get an A for deliverability, you get an F for writing. No.
That's pretty
Penmanship,
accurate. Yeah,
penmanship.
penmanship. So, I used to make fun of my dad because he has terrible handwriting. I was like, Dad, I have beautiful cursive handwriting, and now I have this disaster. So that's fine.
So yeah, I'm not sure anyone writes worse than me, but you may take the cake, my friend. So what are 2 and 3 again? I cannot even make hide.
A safe community, long-term viability.
Okay.
And protect and enhance primary community assets. I'm not sure how this turned into a critique of my handwriting, but I'm okay with it because we're getting great results, so we'll be fine with it. So let's take 6 minutes, if you can. If we can get it all around, let's start there.
Is it all right if I type mine so that you don't have to read my handwriting?
I should have been typing all
Does
along.
Bryce
I'm
have
really
bad
paying-
handwriting?
If this camera's not working, then we're in big trouble. So
No, I just am
Yeah, that's
faster
okay.
at typing.
I'm going to write it down here. Like I said, if it doesn't make sense to you, it'll make sense to me. I'm going to nurse my wounds from being after my handwriting.
Big goals, big objectives.
And as I mentioned, if we don't get everything done within these 4 hours today, that's okay. So we'll continue the conversation, and I'll just reiterate again, I'm here to continue through this process. If it means more conversations, email, communication, whatever that looks like, that's my commitment to see this project through. So let's start, though. We have 35 minutes left until 3 o'clock, and I want to leave a couple of minutes at the end to just give a couple of final thoughts on this process. So we have 3 overarching strategic goals: safe community, long-term viability, and protect and enhance our primary community assets. We talked at the beginning about how this is now when we will tie directly to budget. So we're going to put our literal money where our mouth is to say, in order for us to create, enhance, revive, renew, however you want to phrase that, but so that we have a safe community in Chico, what are the items that need to take place, the objectives to carry this goal out to make it reality? So let's share your ideas. I'll write them down. We'll talk through what they look like. And again, we'll spend, we have about 10 minutes or so that we'll spend on each one of these. And if we need to, we can send follow-up communication to the community, then we can work through as a council to figure out what exactly we do so this is a place and time to go forward for fiscal. Okay? So let's start. Safe community. Objectives.
This might be too broad, but one thing that I've thought about is a Vision Zero campaign for zero traffic deaths in Chico, and that ties into infrastructure safety as well as probably other aspects like enforcement.
You call it what?
Vision Zero.
Vision Zero. Okay. just going to leave it broad there, and we can talk to specifics, okay? So that's an objective to ensure that we have safety.
Going off of that, I was going to say that 0 comes from having really safe infrastructure and making our gyms accessible in a safe way, or else people won't use those modes of transit. And then along with safety, I also put increasing staff and department capacity, fixing potholes, and staffing Engine 1, filling in those resource gaps that already exist in our city.
Okay.
I have police and fire in no particular order. Fire, police, you can put whichever one you want. Knowing the direction our community's growing and making sure we have the proper amount of and placement of those things. And then a different point would be, I have infrastructure and you already got that, but resiliency, making sure we're
When you say resiliency, what is that?
well, it was all those ones that we talked about, fire, water, flood, you know.
So mitigation, preparation, all that.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, kind of along with that, I put wildland management, meaning like our greenways and the outskirts of Chico, particularly to the east.
Can I put a dash?
Yeah.
And I know I'm always talking about this, but another big risk we always forget about is the flood management that our community must be resilient to.
Okay.
So being an equal opportunity council member, I will say fire first, because they do come from the police side. Fire, police, infrastructure, and policy that support those entities.
Okay. So I know you said fire, but I'm just put this up here. I'll keep it as it is, and then put supportive policy next. Does that work?
So I thought what you were looking for are things that are more specific.
We are.
Oh, okay.
We'll work
So
through this.
for fire, my district is on the east side, so fire is a constant concern. But in my mind, the biggest risk is that we have a fire in Bidwell Park. So it's vegetated. So there's two aspects of that: vegetation management in Bidwell Park, but also keeping the homeless out of there so they don't start campfires, which has been a problem. So that's fire. The flood thing is really important, but the county is dealing with that. So it's their responsibility, but we're going to get impacted, so we're on top of it, but it's not a budget impact for us. In terms of personal safety and police, I think the biggest thing we can do, and we've made huge strides thanks to the chief, on traffic safety. And so we have 4.5 traffic cops now. We need more, but that's better than half of one. And we have a red light camera system in the works, because accidents happen at intersections, right, for the most part.
Good. So, and you're right, we are wanting specifics. These are overarching. Again, this is where it's going to take more work than just today, right? But if we have these broad ideas, we know that we're looking for a uniform kind of agreement to say this is important. And then we're looking at, so let's even get more granular and specific on those.
So I think it's a really good process, Jeff, and I think it's important that I know we have a hard stop at 3 and other people probably have commitments, but I think we need to take enough time if we have to get back together again, or however you want to do this, or the mayor wants to do this, that we run this to the ground and we put a bow on it and we got a finished product.
We still got 30 minutes, so let's power through. So if we're getting specific, then, we have we've got traffic safety going. We can argue whether or not we need that more. We had an instance 2 weekends ago, I think it was, or last weekend, where every single fire apparatus that we had was tied up at a unit. Meanwhile, a code red, blue, whatever it is, was called in on the other side of town, and we had nobody to respond. So that's a specific that we need to directly address, do we have enough fire for the size of the city that we have and we're responding to?
So staff department capacity, engine one, can we kind of have?
Engine one slash, yeah.
Yep. So making sure that we're right size for the population, preparing for what the future looks like and growth and all of that.
Correct.
And you're right, we need to get more granular and really take this down to the ground. And it's those specifics where the question that has to be, is this the place where we have the specific granular discussion that we need to allocate this from here to there? Could be, right? So, or it could be something that's done, how the process works, but that's where we need to get to, is identifying those specifics.
So I suspect you're wanting us to identify the macro again for us to then prioritize the micro.
That's right. Yep. So, I'll depend on you for handwriting help and to make my ideas and concepts more succinct. So, anything else here on a safe community?
Councilmember Van Overbeck already touched on homelessness, but I just want to reemphasize that we need to have a multifaceted approach to homelessness.
Okay.
So I want to clarify what I said about the homeless earlier. You wrote that they be housed. So what I meant when I made the comment a couple hours ago was that it is not their choice to camp in our public spaces. They must be compelled to either go to the shelter, get treatment, or go to jail. Those are the choices. One of the choices is not you can just camp in the plaza or Bidwell Park.
Okay, good. Appreciate that. Again, the recording, we'll clarify that on my notes on.
Sorry, last point
please.
before we get there.
Okay.
This might end up falling into a different category, but I was thinking of, this might fall into goal number 3, protect and enhance primary community assets, but protecting our urban forest and Bidwell Park is a safety conversation because we have seen extreme heat building and building and building every single summer. And that is one of the few spaces that a lot of our community who don't have access to air conditioning can go to cool down. So if our urban forest and our lower park are at risk, that also takes away a safety element as well.
Great. Anything else? All right, let's turn our attention then to long-term viability. And this was a catch-all for all the things you remember we talked about. We'll go back and look at it. We talked about business and economic development. We talked about environmental sustainability, all of those things within that. So if this goal is to take place, what are our objectives to carry this out?
Economic strategic plan.
So I'm going to say, and I agree with that, and this is maybe a subset of that, sound financial policy. We almost lost our city because of lack of that. And you can't have long-term viability without short-term viability, and it begins with sound financial policy.
So I'd like to change that because we do have sound financial policy to maintain or sustain sound financial policy, because we're doing a really good job of that now.
Well, and don't suggest that I'm not saying that, Tom.
No, I didn't mean to
I'm just saying that needs to continue because it's not necessarily going to be that way in 10 years unless we make that a continued priority.
Prioritize.
Continue, CONT.
Put a check next to it. Something I throw in there is like steady investment in streets and roads. And I got another. Land use reform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say smart growth, but I feel like those are likely the same thing.
You could put it in parentheses next to it.
Yeah, in parentheses, smart growth, which
Versus stupid
Well, sure. To me, it means growth that, has long-term benefits to our city instead of, investing in streets and roads to nowhere that won't recoup their tax revenue.
An extension of
Following our general plan.
What's that?
Follow our general plan.
An extension of infrastructure investment can also include accessibility, ensuring that our infrastructure is safe for multiple modes of transit.
I put infrastructure accessible.
Support downtown and support the university. Very critical.
And that fits under that and also our last one as well. Okay. Others? Got it?
Yeah, I want to add, so we need to look at housing, our housing policy. And so it was alluded to with smart growth. So there's really two aspects of this, and Addison and I co-chair a committee that's dealing with growth and housing. One is to see if there are any code changes that can be made to facilitate infill development, and we've identified some. And the other is we need to increase the supply of developable land because we're underproducing the single type of housing that people prefer right now, which is 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes. We're not making enough of them, which is why the price is going up. So we really need to look at housing, and those are the two basic things the city can do. I mean, what the city can't do is create affordable housing magically because we don't have market forces and costs of labor and materials and all that stuff.
Good. I appreciate that. Anything else? Very good. Third goal, protect and enhance primary community assets.
Attracting and retaining a workforce while also attracting and retaining a diverse array of businesses.
So we identified three elements: the park, the downtown, and the university. And my colleague, Mr. Bennett, called out the university under viability in downtown, which is exactly right, but it also belongs under, because those are two of the three. And so we need, so specifically what we need to do, and again, this is happening with new leadership at the university that's really excellent, and he's trying very hard to work with the city. But as the council, we need to make sure that we have a downtown that's attractive. And then with Bidwell Park, it just needs a refresh. So we're in the middle of repaving the roads. We're going to rebuild the pool at 1 mile, which is failing structurally. But there are a number of other things that we can do to enhance the park, and we're having conversations with Public Works on how to do that. So again, that's another example of things that are in motion.
So in some ways it's stay the course, in other ways it's create a new course.
I think there's some new things. I think we can do some things with housing as it relates to protecting our asset. I mean, I think we're doing the right thing. As it relates to safety, I think we're doing the right things. We just need to keep doing them and stay focused and not get bored and look for something new and creative.
So along with those three that we, I think, all agree on, one that I think is very important to all of us and for everyone in this community are neighborhoods. We need to prioritize neighborhoods, because if you don't feel safe where you work, where you recreate, where you educate, or where you live, quality of life suffers. The quality of civic life suffers, and neighborhoods have to be a priority as well. Where people live, that's one of the most important aspects of civic life.
Can I ask you to elaborate on some of how you see that playing in? Just because we're talking a lot about the core too in this.
I think where people live, that's a pretty important community asset. And, we have looked at different pieces of that, and it's a broad puzzle, but just looking at safety on our roads. You brought up some things I think were very sound. We looked at stop signs and internal affairs. That's a neighborhood issue as well. All those things, traffic safety that Tom had brought up and commended the chief for. Those are all aspects of neighborhoods. The infrastructure, obviously, if your house is flooding, that's a problem. So neighborhoods have got to be part of that community asset discussion, in my opinion.
And we'll go back here where we look at let's see. They fit together in a holistic, consistent way in order to succeed in that environment. This is what we're talking about from a strategic standpoint. So it fits here, and it fits under safety, right? So these things are not, we're not creating these siloed goals and objectives. This is all happening, and it has to happen, it has to be teaming together, right? They have to be operating in unison in order for us to pursue and achieve the higher quality of civic life here in Chico. So it's not a bad thing if it fits here, it fits here, it fits here. In fact, if you go through and you do a SWOT analysis, which we're not doing today, oftentimes a strength can be a weakness, right? It's the same thing with the question you ask in an interview, what's your biggest weakness? Oh, I just work too much, I'm too committed, I'm a workaholic, I won't stop. That's not a strength, that's a weakness, right? But we turn it into a strength. And so too can an opportunity also be a threat, and vice versa, a threat and opportunity. So it's okay that they're here. In fact, I would much prefer they are, because what it does is it reiterates the importance of them and why they need to be a strategic focus for the council and the work we're doing. So I appreciate that.
I have two. One is kind of already been mentioned, restoration and enhancement of parks and greenways.
So in some ways, what we're talking about here, but we're talking more about greenways and parks and kind of.
Yeah, and I do like to expand it beyond just Bidwell Park because more people live near other greenways too, and yeah. Okay. The other I put is visual enrichment / big art projects. I have in mind something like, we talk about downtown a lot, and I think that is probably the key place to concentrate this out activities, but you should be able to stand anywhere in downtown and recognize that you're in Chico.
I had support the arts on mine, so good.
So we haven't, I don't think we've moved CSU over to here, but what I had written down is to support CSU in their endeavors. I want to be sure to stay in our lane. They have their own goals and they have their things, but we want to support them and to potentially look at new opportunities. So for instance, if they want to expand and do something out at the, you don't have to write this down, but out at the farm, for instance, we want to support them in their endeavors to continue to do things to bring more students, but we don't want to take on their burden. We need to stay in our lane and take care of the city and just be a good partner.
And that gets into this collaboration and it gets into this strategic communication plan, right? So we start to communicate what it is that our partners are doing. So how can we not necessarily create things, but we can enhance the things that are already taking place by partnering with them. Say, hey, look at what's happening at one of the jewels of our community. We're excited to partner with them. It's good. Anything else?
Affordability. I know that that's a larger topic. It's hard to address that specifically in the budget, but I think that's a theme we need to be aware of when we're talking about preserving and enhancing our community aspects, because that helps keep our workforce here. And the transportation improvements, I know that's something we've said in both of the other ones, but making sure that our city stays bikeable and walkable.
So more in line with Mayor's comments on CSU Chico in particular, I think just like strategic partnerships with community organizations and all sorts of like people that are already doing work and being able to make little investments that can really complement and enhance that and leverage that.
That's great. Yeah, folks who are doing this work kind of come alongside and support them, and that creates an exponential impact. For sure. It's great. Thank you. Anything else?
Did we get wildfire resilience in there? I think we touched on it with greenways,
It was
probably.
definitely, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And again, like I said, this isn't, we're not putting the stamp on this and we're done with it. This is a work in progress, so we can make edits. But what we have thus far, the commitment that all of you have made to be together for the last 2 hours and some odd minutes, or 3 hours and some odd minutes, gets us a lot closer to the focus of where we're headed as a council to best serve the community, to create the overall quality of civic life here in Chico. So I want to really quickly go back over this. And I want to talk through what these look like. We started here, a safe community, long-term viability, and then this was a placeholder, which I appreciate Mayor Reynolds saying, let's just call this what it is. Our recommendation on the break to refer to as protect and enhance primary community assets. That gets us into three really, I think, well thought out, developed, honed in strategic goals that will impact both the short term, the midterm, and definitely the long term. Because what you have accomplished in our time together is not just said, what's here in front of us, but what's the impact down the road. And this will continue on beyond 4 years, but the start that we have here is very powerful and impactful. So we go over here and we look at then what are our goals? What are our objectives to carry them out? And I want to just read through them once again. And then we'll send follow-up. We will engage and talk through what that looks like to get even more granular so that we can have time to come before and say, okay, now's how we're going to allocate dollars for the budget process. So we talk about safe community, vision zero, infrastructure, staff department capacity focused on areas and things that similar to potholes, roads, conditions, engine one specifically, supportive policy that leads to the proper staffing of police and fire, resiliency having to do with wildland management, flood management, specifically within Bidwell Park, and the urban forest. We talked through traffic safety, multifaceted approach to homelessness. Okay? And with the clarification that what was said earlier does not specifically mean that they can set up so some specifics that I appreciate. We then go over to goal 2, which we have long-term viability. Economic strategic plan, sound financial policy continue. It's in place, continue, stay the course. Steady investment in streets and roads, land use reform, parentheses, smart growth, follow the general plan, infrastructure accessibility, support the downtown and the university, explore housing policy, the things that the city can do, what's the purview, code changes, and supply of developed land that can be developed. Okay? And then we come to strategic goal 3, protect and enhance the primary community assets. Attract a workforce and a diverse array of businesses. Downtown that's attractive. A Bidwell Park, increasing and enhancing the roads, the pool, but other aspects of that, going back to the urban forest and the importance there. The creation of well thought out neighborhoods to have safe communities where people live. In fact, there's some, as an aside, there's a book written a number of years ago called Well-Being, and it looks at 5 elements of well-being. Maybe you saw this. It looks at financial, it looks at career, it looks at physical, it looks at social, it looks at community. And people always ask when I talk about it, what's the difference between social and community? Community gets the very fact of what you talked about, where you live. Do you feel safe where you live? And each of those 5 elements have a direct impact on the other 4. And so when your career well-being is low, it drags down the other 4. When your career well-being is high, it drags up. When your community well-being is high, you get the idea, right? So these are vital and crucial to the overall protection and enhancement of primary community assets. Then we talked about restoration of parks and greenways, visual enrichment, a large art project. I love the statements of, you should be able to stand anywhere, was it downtown or the university, and look around and say, I know that I'm in Chico. There's something unique, there's something beautiful, there's something joyful about it. Support CSU in their endeavors and look at new opportunities to partner, getting down to this idea of strategic partnerships. Let's not recreate things that are already in place, but let's capitalize on those that are through partnerships. Transportation, of course, and then affordability. So, you have accomplished a lot in a very short amount of time. A project that oftentimes I will spend 2 days on. We did this in 3.5 hours with a couple of breaks, some time allowed for public comments. This is, I guess what I would say, the hope of what we've accomplished, knowing that we're not going to hit our granular limit of 4 hours. But certainly, we're so much closer right now than where we started. So let me just say really quickly, I'm so grateful for your engagement in this process. Perhaps what I'm most grateful for is that you trusted the process and you trusted me to lead us through that. To say, I don't know where we're going. There's some mystery around it, is what you said, right? Some enigma. What's happening here? And yet, I don't know, have hours of work to pour through to communicate back to the council and say, look what we did in the time. At the beginning, I read you this quote. Except you'll notice that the top is different this time. It was plan the work, which we've done. Now it's time to work the plan. So having a strategic plan is a great way to check priorities and progress. Remember to always plan the work, and now we talk about work the plan. Everything cannot be a high priority, and having goals is always a great thing to strive for. Taking into account the resources and funding available, make priorities real and attainable. So we talk through ways to eat this elephant one bite at a time. And we will get even more specific, and so maybe it's a larger bite will now become a nibble, right? And those nibbles eventually consume the entire elephant. I love that it was in the paper that Mayor Reynolds said, we're going to put it on the wall. We talked about that too, because it creates a sense of accountability, which again, we go back to the areas of strategy. We talk about cost leadership, we talk about municipal and city leadership. We look to the council to lead this community. The city staff looks to the council for the directives that are given to carry out policy and things of nature that impact people like me and people like the folks that live next door to you. We have to be accountable to each other, and what I got in this time is that there is a desire and drive to do just that. So I appreciate that because it is accountability that's the glue that ties things to results. And as I mentioned, if we're just here to have an exercise, we just wasted 4 hours of our time. But I would argue that we didn't waste any time because we got this really important outcome, so I'm grateful for that. Was it Eisenhower you quoted earlier? So, and this will be, I think, my last thought, and then I'll leave a couple minutes for maybe comments from the mayor or others, questions if we have time. Our founder wrote an article some years ago, this article titled, Don't Treat a Strategic Plan as Prophecy. He says, ensure stakeholders understand the purpose of your strategic plan. Make sure you plan goals and timeframes. They are not merely crowd pleasers. Encourage a culture of feedback and thoughtful dissent, bless you. And think of your strategic plan as part of your life. But if, or maybe I'd say when, the next uncertain act takes place in our community, we must be able and willing to pivot and to make adjustments and to collaborate, to communicate how we are going to move forward when things don't go according to plan. It's not a matter of if it's going to not go according to plan, it's a matter of when. I said it from the beginning in the one-on-one conversations with the staff, to reiterate over and again the quality of staff that we have here in Chico. I'm proud to call this place home. I'm proud of the council, and I'm proud of the staff as who we are, because together, I think while hope is not a strategy, we have great hope for the future here in Chico. So I don't have to put this up here, this idea of disagreeing, because I think we had great agreement over where our focus and priorities have to be. But sometimes, if we're going to work together, we would say, I may not fully agree with that, but I'm committed to the long game, and we're going to work together in that. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. So what's next? I will put all this together. I'll send it out, I'm assuming, to Debbie. Copy and Angie will have a conversation to talk about if there's another meeting to get more granular to Councilmember Van Overbeck's point. And we'll talk through what that looks like. And then I will put together a document, as was mentioned earlier. There will be one that's public-facing and one that's internal, with some specifics. It won't be, as the kids are saying these days, TLDR, which is too long to read. I don't want to give you a 27-page document because you don't want to read that. But something that's very succinct, and I'll probably send it to Councilmember O'Brien to make sure that I communicate properly and succinctly. And not in my own handwriting, I'll type this for sure. So, final thoughts before we end our time.
Mr. Van Overbeck?
Good process, Jeff. And I think the part I liked about it was there were no surprises. I mean, I think to one degree or another, we all have similar priorities, and what you did is clarify and distill them for us, which is very valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank you as well, despite the handwriting snafu. You did an excellent job, and I appreciate the distilling as well. And really, there was a little mystery at first. Certainly, I understand where you're going with this and setting up the macro so we can determine the micro. I appreciate that, and that helps us to formalize our goals and objectives, particularly moving into budget season. So thank you for that, Jeff.
I would also like to thank you. I've been through hundreds of strategic planning sessions. We had to do it every year for the shopping center, and we did SWOT every year. I never want to see SWOT again, and I thank you for not bringing that before us. You did a great job. I think this is very, very valuable process, so I thank you for that.
I had fun. Thank you.
All right, well, I will wrap it up to say thank you for giving us your time and all your effort and everything that you've done for us and being prepared and taking all the time with staff to get us here. My goal, if my co-counselors are willing, would be that we would do this in January of next year, so we're doing it much before budget season, and it becomes an annual process where we check in at the first of the year. How did we do on what our goals were last year? Where are we going for this year? And it would become, an annual review. And then once we have your report, then we can bring it up and have a conversation about, okay, do we want to drill down even further from here and do, maybe it's only a couple-hour workshop or an hour, workshop again. So I appreciate you staying on for that. And unless we have anything else, I'll adjourn us to our closed session on the 1st, either at 5 or 5:30, not sure which that's going to be yet, followed by regular council at 6 o'clock right here in the chambers. All right, we're adjourned.
Great job, everyone.